This is Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
All right, let's do it, folks. Welcome to another episode of Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Actually, a very special episode. Milestone for the fellas. Episode 500 today, and big day today, coming out of a weekend. Wrapped the trade deadline, and got another game tonight with the Winnipeg Jets at home. Kyle Connor bobblehead night as the Jets take on the San Jose Sharks. Quick heads up, 6:30 start tonight. Got caught off guard by that a little bit earlier, so govern yourselves accordingly for a puck drop tonight. Listen, we've got a big show today, a very special guest. Frank Seravalli is going to join us coming up in about 20-25 minutes from Daily Faceoff. Looking forward to getting Frank's take on what happened and what didn't happen at the trade deadline, his thoughts on the Winnipeg Jets and the rest of the National Hockey League. And then more on the home team with Jeff Hamilton of the Winnipeg Free Press. And we've got plenty of audio from a very busy weekend for the Winnipeg Jets as well to get through right off the bat. But yeah, as of course it is episode 500, I have to first and foremost thank all of you for making us a part of your day so much over the course of the last 2 years. Wednesday is our official second anniversary. Man, it's time has flown by since March 8th of 2021 when we launched this venture, and could not be more happy with the way that it's gone. So a huge thank you to everyone that watches this on YouTube, whether it be live or after the fact, and of course everyone that's grabbing that podcast and firing it up after in the afternoon or the evening every day here in Winnipeg. And of course, we would not be here, would not be doing this if it wasn't for the incredible support of our sponsors. Of course, Royal Sports, the Nick and Nicky DQ Group, Not Auto Corp, as well as Boston Pizza with us from day -1, actually. I mean, it was really when they said that, you know, we'll support you guys and see how things go for the first little bit that we knew that we could make this happen. And, you know, to have companies like Princess Auto and Coolbet, Little Brown Jug, Culligan Water, Vita Health Fresh Market, Wallace & Wallace, Canadian Club, Consolidated Supply, F Apparel, and of course, Donnie and the gang at Manitoba Battery come on board as well. It's we are greatly appreciative of the opportunity to do this every day, and here's to another 500 and many, many more. Of course, this show doesn't happen without my partner in crime, one Michael Remis, who gets in here. And Reem, 500 today. Congratulations to everything you've pulled off. And it's going to be a fun show today because we've got a lot to talk about, including a win for the Winnipeg Jets on the weekend after a pretty ugly Friday night in Edmonton.
Yeah, happy 500. Big milestone week. Pretty exciting. You know, I never used to count the number of shows we did at the old station, so I don't know how many I've done, but it's definitely a lot over the last 10 plus years. You know, 10 years ago, I want to feel it says like supposed to be year 2000, but 10 years ago was 2013 now. But yeah, I mean, honestly, I was pretty down on Friday. You know, you thought it was going to be a letdown game. You know, they didn't make that big splash at the deadline. You thought maybe they could, and then they go into Edmonton, and I mean, Edmonton steamrolled Toronto earlier in the week. They're extremely hot. Connor McDavid playing as well as anyone ever has in the last, I don't know, 25, 30 years. So, you know, giving up, 5 goals and a win, I think you're okay with that. Friday's game, I mean, off to a rough start, and they really got dominated, but they came back Saturday and were able to get a win. Lowry scored. A lot of bottom six guys. Barron with a beautiful goal as well. The top guys are scoring. You know, Morrissey's putting the team on his back. It was incredible atmosphere, Hockey Night in Canada. I think we're all feeling a lot better again. And, you know, I know I'm going on here, sorry. But you look at the playoff standings, and there's really only 2 teams chasing the Jets. It's Calgary and Nashville. Nashville's kind of thrown in the towel a little. And Calgary really hasn't found the cohesiveness with their new addition. So I'm confident the Jets will make the playoffs, but it was a rough week last week.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm a lot more confident after Saturday. I mean, you know, Jets needed to get a win. They needed to get some sort of forward momentum and progress. And, you know, to come back the way that they did after an absolutely miserable night in Edmonton, And a similar start, with Blake Wheeler taking a penalty in the first 2 minutes and it quickly being behind Connor Hellebuyck and the Jets being down 1-0. I think there was a lot of dread in that building that here we go again. But full credit to the team for battling back. And it was a game where, it was all hands on deck. I mean, I know the score is certainly not what the goalies would like to see, but Hellebuyck made some big saves in that third period when the Winnipeg Jets really needed them. You had Mark Scheifele getting on the board early, as you mentioned, Adam Lowry getting that gorilla off his back, finally having something go his way and getting one in. And I mean, even Kyle Capobianco came in and played a heck of a game. Remo and scored a massive goal that was just part of what was truly a roller coaster night. But as I tweeted out afterwards, incredible atmosphere in the building. And Connor McDavid's such a special player. You really notice it more so with the kids. I mean, sometimes Edmonton or, obviously Toronto and Montreal will come in here and they'll be fans of the opposing teams. But, I mean, if you were there for warm-up on Saturday night, the amount of kids just trying to get a look close up of Connor McDavid, I think tells you all you need to know about hockey's number one superstar and what he does everywhere where he goes. But for the Jets to be able to score a few goals, to come back from a couple deficits when, frankly, they had crumbled in the past, hard to overstate how important it was for the Winnipeg Jets just to get a win. And then when you combine it to another miserable night for the Calgary Flames, losing on home ice to the Minnesota Wild, I think Jet fans may be a little less stressed about the trend of the hockey club and where they are, at least in the playoff race right now, coming into this game against the San Jose Sharks tonight. By the way, a big thanks, welcome to Valerie Cook, who just became a supporter of Winnipeg Sports Talk. Evan Hunter with a super chat. Congrats on 500 shows, guys. Thanks for all you do. A big one from Mark C. Mark, thank you very much for that generous super chat. We greatly appreciate it. But Remo, and I think we were texting off air. That win on Saturday, I'm not sure whether the team needed it more or the fan base, but you do have to go a long ways back to remember a win that was so desperately needed by pretty much all parties involved. It was a pretty cantankerous fan base coming out of Friday's trade deadline, and then the performance, I think, just exacerbated that on Friday night, because that was a long night at the office. And, that'll happen when you just keep on having a parade to the penalty box against the most lethal power play in the National Hockey League and the two best players on the planet.
Yeah, Friday they just kept taking penalty after penalty, and that's what happens against Connor McDavid. I mean, the guy's been incredible. Leon Draisaitl as well, as the super chat swing in. Shout out to T-Will, Wrench Doozer. Anyways, I'll continue. I don't want to derail the show, but it wasn't a great mood on Friday. You thought that, I was reading all the articles saying how the team or the management didn't have confidence in the team, which is why, they wouldn't want to give up a first round pick. And you kind of felt that just how the way that they had played, but you knew that this was, a solid hockey team, Huss, that had put themselves in first place after 40 games, and they were just trying to find their way back. I don't know if they found that defensive structure. They've given up like 5 goals a game here the last 5 games, and they gave up another 5 spot on Saturday. I don't think there's any shame giving 5 up against McDavid, who was just scoring 2 per game by himself, not counting assists. But on Saturday, I think you want to see, them. They were down, they came back, they blew a lead, they came back, and they were able to hang on in the third period. And Connor Hellebuyck, while he still gave up 5, he was pretty damn solid there in the third period. That new guys, Niederreiter has done what he was brought in to do, be a big body in front of the net, throw his weight around. Nemesnikov got on the board with an assist on that shutdown line, and I think Kyle Capobianco comes in after keeping the seat warm or the bench warm for a long time and scores. He's got 2 goals in 10 games, on pace for 16 goals if he played in all 82. But they were able to pull out a win. I think a lot of people feel a lot better after beating the Edmonton Oilers on Saturday.
Well, and listen, that leads into tonight's game against the San Jose Sharks, because I've been telling anyone that's paid attention to the schedule this next little while, is going to be some of the most difficult matchups the Winnipeg Jets have had all season long. A red-hot Minnesota Wild team coming in here with a lot of momentum on Friday, and then that trip out to Florida, Tampa, Carolina, and you come back against the Boston Bruins. I mean, there are no easy ones on the slate, and this is certainly, as far as where these teams are in the playoffs, the best opportunity for the Winnipeg Jets to build off of that win on Saturday night, because one win is not going to cut it. But they need to keep it going, and we'll be all over that. And we'll hear from some of the clips from some of the players in a minute. Kim Sawchuk, thank you so much for the support, Kim. That's a beautiful gift in the super chat. Thanks so much. And T. Will, 500 shows on the path to world domination, or at least getting Remo a proper mute light that works. Let me just quickly mention, when it comes to muting, Remo's off the hook forever. Because if anybody saw the beginning of Friday night's Kenny and Rennie, our great friends Ken and Sean, there was a mute fiasco that has made anything on WST look minuscule in comparison. And we won't play a clip or anything. Maybe we'll have a little fun, because I think Rennie's going to join us in the next couple days on the program. But poor Rennie, I mean, cranked out, a big, passionate soliloquy after the Jets got waxed in Edmonton. And I'd say about 4 minutes in, he finally looked at the chat and realized that his mic had been muted the entire time. And the look on poor Ren's face when the realization became real that no one had been able to hear him unless they were able to lip read for the last 4 minutes was honestly the laugh that I needed after that game. And who knows, maybe Rennie was the one that sort of broke the streak in a lot of ways, just getting the vibes back up of some laughs, some hilarity. And as I said, Remo, you're off the hook forever when it comes to mute fiascos. It would not be possible on our program to have one like last night. And it speaks to how, while Ken's writing, it is somewhat of a one-man show. We don't have big teams behind us. But I'll be honest, I'm still laughing about that last night, only because we've had so many mute incidents here on WST, and there's a reason there's a mute button emoji for all you members that can use if you do like.
Yeah, I don't know if everyone watches Kenny and Rennie, but Sean Reynolds did go on for like 5 minutes on mute. So I felt really bad because I've been in that situation before. It's usually, I realize it's always when we play clips. I always forget to mute myself coming out of clips, and I'm just not going to try not to do that. And we do have a lot of great clips, Huss. From today, the Friday's game after. I mean, Rick Bowness's comments after, left me pretty down. It seemed like they had forgot how to play defense and how to stick to their game plan. And it was nice to see them score some goals and everyone get in on the scoring on Saturday. Lowry, breaking the 35 game goalless drought, which he got off to such a hot start. He was on pace for a career year, and then kind of his numbers tailed off. And Morgan Barron as well had a goalless drought, and he had a beautiful move on Jack Campbell. So
that line with Nemetsnikov, and listen, I know there was, and again, I'm not sure whether the more negative voices are the ones that are the most amplified. That certainly is the case in real life on social media. And maybe that was the case more in the chat, or maybe just there was that many people that were completely bent that the Jets didn't make some crazy blockbuster trade. But I'll tell you what, man, especially on Saturday night when Nemetsnikov made his debut, he looked like just what the doctor ordered. Man, he had a solid game. Got on the score sheet and made a couple of big defensive plays. When the Edmonton Oilers were really working them hard, and Nemetsnikov fit in very, very well with Adam Lowry and Morgan Barron, and lo and behold, both of those guys got on the score sheet. So there's a lot to get to from this weekend. We won't spend too much time on Friday's game, Remo, but let's get to the Bones clip afterwards, because Rick Bowness was sounding somewhat similar than he had over a number of weeks, as the Jets had some pretty ugly performances. But the way that the game started, the lack of discipline from the Winnipeg Jets, and the lack of execution left Rick Bowness in a very, very perturbed state after the game, especially knowing that they were going back against the Oilers 22 hours later. Here's Bones on Friday's game.
We never coached the team, I don't think, that was so undisciplined and took so many penalties. So play a third of the game shorthanded against that team, they're going to make you look bad, and they made us look bad today.
Is that a product of just them flying around, or a product of
No,
you
I
guys
think
not
it's
moving your feet?
not moving our feet. You can tell, you know your team's ready when your details on face-offs are right on, and we weren't very good on the details at all in the face-offs. And we weren't moving our feet at all. So when you get outworked and like they did, and you don't pay attention to details and you don't compete hard enough, you end up looking bad, and we look bad.
Well, Bones, I mean, not sugarcoating it at all. Not ready to play. The details weren't great. When you don't work hard enough, when you get out-competed, I mean, you can go down the list. It ends up being in that final score, which I believe is 6-3, was absolutely lipstick on a pig. I mean, that could have been 8 or 9 zip at one point. And of course, Connor Hellebuck mercy pulled after the second period. Big save Dave went in the third period. The Jets, I mean, the Oilers kind of pumped the brakes on it. I think probably knowing that, well, Connor McDavid played almost 10 minutes in the first period because the Oilers were on the power play for 8 minutes. So maybe that was a weird strategy to try to wear them out before Saturday's game. I'm not sure. Here's one more from Bones from Friday, just talking about how they also made the Oilers look better because of the way the Winnipeg Jets played and didn't compete.
We made them look a whole lot better than they are. They're a very good team, there's no question about that, but my point is we made it very easy for them to play their game. And we have to take a lot more pride in our ability to defend, which we were doing for most of the season, which is now not nearly where it needs to be.
All right, so that was a pretty perturbed Bones after Friday's loss in Edmonton. But no time to feel sorry for themselves. Right back on the plane after the game, getting ready for that 6 o'clock start at Canada Life Center on Saturday night. And it was Vladimir Nemetsnikov's debut, but everybody stepped up at times in a wild game that I think most would agree, if you're lucky enough to be at the game or have tickets for it, probably the game of the year, at least so far. And they got the response that they needed and got the result. Here's what Bones had to say about a much different result and performance from his team Saturday night.
Well, yeah, very happy with the response of the team and how we played last night. We had to make some lineup changes, but the whole team responded very well. So I think it's more based on the disappointment of yesterday. And the way we bounced back tonight, but so we needed to make some lineup changes, and we did.
All right, and of course the lineup changes included Logan Stanley and Nate Schmidt being healthy scratched. Kyle Capobianco came in, Dylan Sandberg came in, and of course Capobianco scored a huge goal for the Winnipeg Jets to put them up 4-3. It also was Vladislav Nemetsnikov's debut. Bones very familiar with Nemetsnikov from Dallas and from Tampa, and man, he made a difference in that game on Saturday night. Here's the head coach on the newest member of the Winnipeg Jets who made his debut wearing number 7.
The little things Vladdy does that in the first period, like he took the puck to the net and almost scored. His play in the third period, the puck somewhere around the board, and he's a left-hand shot, and he takes that puck off the boards, and we're gone. Like, he's very good at all the little details of the game. He's got great hockey sense, and he's got a great feel for the game. You guys don't know, he's a tough little guy. I mean, he is tough. He can fight, right? So, and you love his compete. So I thought Vladdy, for a guy that hadn't skated for a couple of days, other than this morning, I thought he was outstanding.
So there's Rick Bowness on Nemetsnikov's debut. And listen, I'm not sure whether it was coincidence that Adam Lowry scored and Morgan Barron scored, but I can tell you, Remo, that third line looked more effective than it had in ages on Saturday night and was rewarded for the way that they played.
Yeah, as you said, Lowry scoring Barron's wearing, I thought Nemestikov looked pretty good. Wearing number 7, I was kind of hoping he'd rock 90. I believe he wore that 7 previously.
I was thinking, has there ever been a 90 in 2.0 history?
I don't know. I'm not sure. There's been 7. Ben Sherratt, Kulikov was 7.
Well, completely different theory of numbers than Niederreiter.
I agree.
I mean, Niederreiter got the 2 big numbers.
Yes.
And Nemestikov, back with Tampa wearing number 90, had that same sort of fill out the jersey. So, yeah, he went and grabbed Ben Sherratt's old number 7, and the name bar's long. The number isn't, but the impact was big, and that's what was most important from the newest Jet.
Yeah, he wore 90 twice with the Lightning and Rangers. He wore 90 everywhere, but not with the Jets. They have a rule that you can't wear 90 or something. I'm just curious.
Maybe it wasn't available.
And it does look, Nino's got a point. It looks weird with the long name and the 1 number. It looks off. Nino's got it right, going 62 with the long name, but he fit in pretty well with those guys, and they've kind of been looking for that third line, and Appleton's been out, and he's back tonight, but it will be Nemestikov again with Lowry and Barron.
So Nemestikov makes his debut. The Jets get a win. Let's hear from Josh Morrissey and Adam Lowry, who spoke after the game. And Morrissey continues to be the catalyst when it comes to, trying to drag his team out of some doldrums. Was a big part of it again on Saturday night. Here's Josh Morrissey on getting that win on Saturday.
I thought we competed tonight and brought the intensity and played on our toes. Obviously, as you said, the early power play and goal against can kind of bring back some bad memories, I guess, in the short term. But, we got back on it and just kept playing. I think that just shows we were ready to play tonight, and even some adversity early wasn't going to affect our ability to keep playing and play, the rest of the 58 minutes or whatever it was.
All right, so there's Josh Morrissey, a relieved Josh Morrissey after Saturday's game. But I don't think anyone was more relieved than Adam Lowry, who broke that, 35-game goalless drought with a very important goal, and, of course, a big part of the win with his line chipping in the way they did with the newcomer Nemestikov. Here was Lowry on getting that gorilla off his back.
Yeah, it's huge, I think. The longer that thing goes on, the more you think about it and the more it weighs on you, and it just starts affecting other parts of your game. So it's nice to get that out of the way. Bear snapping a slump as well. So, it was nice to get a little secondary scoring tonight and get back in the win column.
Yeah, big smiles all around, both on the ice and on the bench, and certainly in the stands when Lowry scored. We'll hear more from the Winnipeg Jets from today a little later on as we get ready for this game tonight against the Sharks. All right, have to give a big shout out to our friends over at Manitoba Battery. Gang, if you're in need for a battery for your car, your truck, or even that summer toy you're working on this winter, Manitoba Battery is the most convenient and well-priced option in the city. So convenient that you can put that order in right around lunchtime or even by the time WST goes on, and it'll be sitting on your doorstep in 2 to 4 hours for less money than you'd spend anywhere else in Winnipeg on the same battery. Basically, the Amazon of batteries, and you're shopping local. No more fighting for a parking spot at Costco, waiting in line at Canadian Tire, or spending more money on a battery at the big box stores. Let Manitoba Battery bring that battery to you while you spend time on more important things. Give them a phone call or simply order online at manitobabattery.com. It is that simple. Big shout out to Donnie and the gang. And of course, if you do want to pop in and see them and their great staff, they're at 1026 Logan Avenue. Pretty chilly out today, but spring is just around the corner. I know the guys at Consolidated Supply are getting ready for golf season, working with specialists throughout the industry on irrigation, artificial turf, and more. And of course, they are the exclusive club car dealer here in Manitoba. But they actually have so much more. They're the leaders in small engine parts and repair. And they've also got incredible landscaping options if you're thinking about summer projects. How about a new spa or hot tub in that backyard? And maybe join that with a beautiful outdoor kitchen. Tons of options. Pop down and see them at Consolidated Supply, 1395 Niagara Road East, or online at cte.ca. Don't forget, February nominations are open for the Unsung Hero. along with Wallace and Wallace, and of course, Jets defenseman Josh Morrissey. Send us an email to unsunghero@winnipegsportstalk.com and let us know about that person in your life and your community that is making the lives of others better through extended volunteerism, charity work, or maybe just being that person on the block that's always there when others are in need. The Unsung Hero is going to get an autographed jersey from Jets All-Star defenseman Josh Morrissey. Wallace and Wallace will make a $500 donation to the Dream Factory in the name of the WST listener that nominated the Unsung Hero. And Josh and Margot Morrissey are going to match that $500 donation to the Dream Factory as well. Everyone's a winner. Get those nominations into Unsung Hero at winnipegsportstalk.com. And just before we bring in our first guest of episode 500, if you're looking for great prices on natural and organic supplements, beauty products, and groceries, and Winnipeg's largest assortment of local products too, you need to head down to one of 7 Vita Health Fresh Market stores or online at myvita.ca. St. Patrick's Day just around the corner. You can celebrate the day with some non-alcoholic craft beer mocktails and great snacks too. And with spring just around the corner, fellas, get ready for it with Ultimate Male Energy. Formulated specifically for men over 35, Ultimate Male Energy is designed to help improve testosterone production, reduce excess body fat, build muscle tissue, maintain prostate health, and more. It's on sale today at Vita Health. Vita Health Fresh Market, empowering people to lead healthy lives. 7 Winnipeg locations, including the newest store in Linden Ridge, and online at myvita.ca. All right, this is going to be a real treat. We figured that for episode 500, we had to come out with one of the heaviest of hitters. It's been a minute, but what a treat to have Frank Seravalli, fresh off the NHL trade deadline, join us today. Frank, what's up, bud? How are you? And thanks for doing this.
You said a literal heavy hitter, right? Is that what you were getting at? I gotcha. I'm picking you up. Hey, look, congratulations. 500 episodes. That's a huge deal. Such a big fan of what you and Remo have built at Winnipeg Sports Talk, and love to be back with you.
Well, listen, it's great to see what you guys are doing at DFO. And by the way, just before we get into it, loving the new pod. I mean, just fill people in. I mean, if you didn't have enough of Frank on all the DFO channels,
way too much of me out there. I'm sick of hearing myself talk.
No, but frankly speaking, a little bit of a different look and a different style of format than what you do on the DFO Rundown.
Yeah, it's just a one-on-one interview series. And so every Wednesday, drop an interview, me and some of the biggest names in the hockey world. Had Josh Morrissey on. We talked, I guess he was episode 2, I think, just right out of the gate at All-Star Weekend, and had a great conversation with him about lots of different things, not just his season and sort of the offensive explosion, but also what was the impact of, Blake Wheeler and the captaincy change? Would he like to be the next captain of the Jets? And just the confidence that I think Josh Morrissey has in his game, that he's such a great guy to talk to because he's easy to talk to, but every time he answers a question, he actually tries to answer it and is super honest. So pulls no punches, and I think that's exactly what you'd like to expect from someone who's likely to be the next leader of the Jets.
Well, it's funny you say that. I mean, that question is asked quite often, and Josh will say whatever in front of microphones. He's answering the question every single time he takes the ice and puts that jersey on.
But you could tell he would really want it. Like that's something that would be a real honor to him that he takes super seriously.
Well, and listen, he's playing like the captain right now. And Frank, I mean, I know you've been paying attention. This last 6 weeks has not been smooth sailing for the Winnipeg Jets. And I mean, this kind of started at the end of January, and Josh, maybe we still refer to it as the Morrissey game, that game against St. Louis at the end of January, heading into the All-Star break where the Jets had lost 2 in a row. They were down 2-0 in the third period. He literally put the team on his back, and we've seen him at times during this stretch be the one guy that has really sort of stepped up. And I don't think you'd find anyone in this market that pays attention to the Winnipeg Jets that doesn't think that Josh Morrissey is going to be the next captain. And to be honest, he's playing about it right now, right now. Let me ask you, though, about your thoughts about where the Jets are. I mean, people feeling a little bit better about the plight of the team after that win on Saturday night and Calgary's loss. Certainly a little bit better in the playoff standings, but are we just seeing the regression to the mean of where people thought the Winnipeg Jets were, or is this unfortunately deja vu for a team that has had some pretty unfortunate second half swoons over the course of the last 4 or 5 seasons?
I think it's probably a little bit of a blend of both, Huss, to be totally honest. And it hasn't been great these last 6 weeks. But, I think when you look at where this Jets team is and who they have in net, the truth is, no matter what, it's operation get into the playoffs, first and foremost. And, I hate to speak out of turn and start etching a team's epitaph, but the Calgary Flames, you can more or less stick a fork in them and their playoff hopes. The math is daunting. You can see it in the players' faces on their bench. That, to me, hasn't looked like a team that's been right all season long. And does anyone honestly think that the Nashville Predators are suddenly going to rebound into a playoff team at this point? I don't. I think the field is set in the West. And regardless of how the Jets have sort of been up and down on this roller coaster in the last 6 weeks, the real fact of the matter is that they're going to be a tough out in the playoffs, regardless of who they face. And I think the West is so wide open that it more or less doesn't really matter so long as I think you can avoid the Colorado Avalanche in round one. Short of that, I don't really care who you face and what building, when it is. You play it on Mars if you want. This team, I think, is still going to be a ridiculously tough out. So it doesn't really matter right now. You'd like to see the team playing more consistently, but I think when it's all said and done, they're going to be just fine.
Now, let's talk about the Jets at the deadline. And it was, fascinating to hear from people in our chat and certainly from people on social media. And I'm not sure whether, I think a big part of it was that the Jets had, been in first place. They had a really good first half of the season that raised expectations. We all know what's coming for the Winnipeg Jets, some huge decisions and possibly some massive turnover. When we got to the deadline, I was sort of expecting they'd try to add something to the top six and maybe a couple players in the bottom six. They got Nemetsnikov, and that was it. How did you see the Jets going into the deadline? Were you surprised that maybe they weren't more active, or did they make a couple prudent moves to help them right now without, taking too much out of what is going to be some necessary assets of potentially a big change after this season?
So you were just doing your read for your friends at Consolidated Supply there, and I couldn't help but think of one line that was specific in that read, in which they are your home for small engine parts. And that's essentially what the Jets did at this deadline, is they've added a few small engine parts to their team. That's what Vlad Nemetsnikov is. That's essentially what Nino Niederreiter is at this point in his career. They're support pieces for a group that is, I think, pretty well constructed up front. Where I was a little bit surprised to see them get through Friday was to not add just a little bit of a different element on the back end. Like, that's the one thing that really stands out to me. Is we can talk about Josh Morrissey and the incredible season that he's had and some of the other guys on the Jets, defense core. Outside of Brendan Dillon, like, who's a guy that really has some brawn and muscle and brings some bite to your back end? And that, to me, is one thing that's sort of sorely missed. You can account for the occasional hit from Neil Pionk, for instance. It's not a group that's intimidating, and not to say that that's the end all be all, but I just felt like that was one part of this Jets team that was missing and that was never really accounted for. And when I say that, that's not me being critical of the Jets' overall deadline, because I think the truth is, as you've watched everyone else really go crazy, particularly in the East, where it's going to be a steel cage death match in the first couple rounds, the Jets kept their powder dry for the most part, which is a shock to no one who's watched this team closely under Kevin Cheveldayoff. It's that I don't know how many true difference makers were out there. People have been so critical, for instance, look in the East, of the Carolina Hurricanes in the last couple of days. They swung big on Timo Meier, and what I loved about their deadline was when they didn't get him, they just turned around and said, okay, we have $10 million in cap space. We're going to add a free piece in Jesse Puljujärvi here to weaponize our cap space, and we're going to add a 50-point defenseman in Shane Gostisbehere as a value addition. And in one of his first games with the team over the weekend, he chips in 3 power play points. And so you take the team that was the best team in the NHL since January 11th, an 800-plus points percentage, and you've added 2 lowercase additions to their team. Now, I get it if you're a Jets fan today that's sitting here saying, well, hold on a second. Our team has been in a rut of late. We were in first place for a good chunk of the year. We're not any longer, and it seems like we're sputtering along. Who's going to help drag us out of that? And the answer that I would have to you is there is no knight in shining armor that's going to suddenly show up in Winnipeg and grab this team and carry them forth. I didn't see it evaluating the market. I think there was the potential for some longer term, bigger picture, 30,000 foot view, reshaping the core of this team. But those are all conversations that are going to be had in the summer and groundwork to lay for then. So if you think of one guy that I mentioned over the last couple of weeks with the Jets was Ivan Provorov. Like, we know that they were interested in Provorov going back a couple years to the conversations when Patrick Laine was traded. You're probably not pulling off a Provorov trade right at this exact moment in time. That's a summer thing. And so once the big name, big piece acquisitions went off the board, I kind of thought it was a prudent move for the Jets to sit back, as frustrating as that may be for the fan base, to say, we've got bigger fish to fry later on.
Did you get a sense, though, that the Jets were working on anything bigger that didn't come to fruition? We'd certainly heard their names involved in the Chychrun deal. And the Chychrun one is a player that I think in a lot of markets people were quite enamored with. He'd been on the trade block seemingly for a year. And that got amplified when he went to Ottawa for much less, I think, than most people thought that he would go for, Frank.
Yeah, and it also feels like a really good fit for the Sens in the sense that that's a market he really wanted to go to. And not to say that he had any control in the matter. Mm-hmm. He wanted to go to a team that has a chance to win at some point, unlike the Coyotes, which feels like, forever off in the distance. The Coyotes and winning, it's kind of like that sign that you post in the bar that says free beer tomorrow. Like, when is tomorrow exactly? No one's really sure. But his sister lives in Ottawa. His grandpa lives in Ottawa. This just seemed to, his summer home is in Ottawa. This just seemed to connect a lot of dots for Jacob Chychrun, and the Sens were able to smoke out the Coyotes on the price, waiting until the last minute. I don't know that the Jets were ever very seriously involved in Chychrun. I don't think that they were ever very seriously involved in Ivan Provorov or anything else. I think what they did is they monitored the market and monitored pricing. And when they found that they were able to get someone like Niederreiter for a second-round pick and able to do it in a way that doesn't disrupt the future really, and you have him for another year with term on his deal, that just seemed to align. And so it seemed to me that they always had one eye on this deadline, but also Huss on the future as well.
Well, and of course, the future. I mean, we've heard enough from people that are pretty tied in that Pierre-Luc Dubois won't be long for Winnipeg. I mean, do you see the way we've often talked about a 2-year window, or people mention a 2-year window with the end of these contracts? But I've always thought, Frank, that it was a 1-year window. It was this year, because after this year, you need to figure out what's going on with Hellebuck. You need to figure out what's going on with Dubois, the future of Mark Scheifele. Because for a team and an organization like the Winnipeg Jets that doesn't, go heavy into free agency, I would suggest that if those players are not going to be re-signing with you, you need to figure out the best way to maximize those assets. And I would suggest that around this year's draft might very well be the case for one or more of those players.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree in your view of the window and also how significant and important this summer is for the Winnipeg Jets. However, that brings us back to this trade deadline and the thought process of, how exactly would this unfold? And my question to you, and it's not a rhetorical one, like I actually want to engage in a bit of a conversation with you about it, is like, so let's give you a hypothetical. Ryan O'Reilly, he gets traded to the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's obviously hurt now, out probably for the next 3 to 4 weeks with a fractured finger. But the data suggested that Ryan O'Reilly gives the Toronto Maple Leafs an additional 0.5% chance to win the Stanley Cup. And that was viewed and heralded as a significant acquisition for the Leafs. Is there someone legitimately out there that you felt moved on the market that would have been a true game changer for the Jets? and really, like, what would have put this team over the top and greatly or significantly changed their chances?
Well, I mean, listen, I think the key part of that question is put them over the top. I mean, I don't think there was a player. The one player that was the most intriguing to me that did move at a very significant cost was Timo Meier. And I know people will say, well, you know, he's a guy that would come in, they engaged and he didn't want to re-sign. I'm not sure that you wouldn't have been able to trade him at the draft for a similar package if he wasn't going to sign with potentially a team that would have been able to extend him.
Not only that, but you'd be able to just give him, he's under team control. Say, you know what? We're giving you the $10 million qualifying offer, whether you like it or not. And we're bringing you back if you're Winnipeg. And at the same time, that might mean that we're saying goodbye to Pierre-Luc Dubois because he wants out anyway. There's our cap space to go do it.
Well, for sure. And again, you know, if you do find out that this guy is also going to be one of the players that isn't long, I mean, the GM is really going to be earning his money, assuming it's Kevin Cheveldayoff, with these future deals, because, you know, you basically are the steward of the future of this organization right now. And so much of it is going to depend on what happens, either re-signing or what you get back for those players. And listen, it would be essentially adding another potential problem to that list. But in the meantime, it would certainly make you better. But Frank, I mean, and this was where I was at kind of as we, you know, week by week, basically from the middle of January until right now, I didn't have a lot of confidence, basically, to paraphrase it, that this team was going to be a, quote, true Stanley Cup contender with any of those players coming in because
so
of...
doesn't that make your point in the sense that, like, the fan base was up in arms saying, when is Kevin Cheveldayoff going to wake up? When are they going to do something? Hello, what's happening here? I'm with you. Like, I don't view the Jets as they were on the positive side of the ledger compared to the Calgary Flames in the same spot on the other side, which is, we have a team that if they get in could do some damage, but is it really worth going out and going absolutely crazy to add to this team when it's probably not going to significantly alter our chances one way or the other?
You know, and that is, I think, where they end. But that being said, I thought that the Niederreiter deal, as far as what was given up and compared to the other deals, might have been one of the best value deal as well. And I'll tell you what, Nemetsnikov, albeit a bottom six player, they needed a big boost in the bottom six. He played his first game, and all of a sudden guys that haven't scored in a month are scoring, and he was impactful defensively. He was an improvement there. I thought they might get another player or two in that sort of mold or role, but they didn't. Bottom line is they got a big win. Aside from the Jets, though, Frank, you've been covering this league for a long time. Have you ever seen anything like that arms race that built in the East, not just at the deadline, but really over the course of about 10 days, day after day, massive deal? And I mean, the assets, I don't know.
Almost broke me.
The list of assets that have been given up by those teams. I mean, Carolina, they might be sitting in the back going, we'll see how this works in the long run for all these teams. And listen, that's still a team that could ironically beat all of these teams that made the aggressive moves. They looked pretty good yesterday, embarrassing the Lightning.
See, that's the thing. I don't know that the trade deadline is where you really improve your team. It was another thing that their GM in Carolina, Don Waddell, said on Sunday was, Michael Russo had it in The Athletic. He said, I think the best time to improve your team is in the summer. And it's not that they didn't try. They were deep in on Timo Meier. And, you know, when it's all said and done, I actually think they put the best offer on the table for Timo Meier. I was shocked to hear Sharks GM Mike Greer say that they valued the quantity that New Jersey was willing to provide over the quality from some other teams. And so, you know, you think back to the last number of Stanley Cup winners over the last 10 years, the most significant addition that we saw made was probably Jeff Carter to the Kings in 2012 or Marian Gaborik in 2014. Outside of that, they've almost all sort of been on the depth side of the game. They've been the Michael Kempneys in 2018 with Washington, or Goudreau and Coleman with the Tampa Bay Lightning in 2021, or, you know, last year was Arturi Lehkonen. And so nice pieces to have, but not necessarily the game changers, the big name blockbuster that you always think about, not the Tarasenkos or the Patrick Kanes or whoever it may be. Not to say that the New York Rangers can't win the Stanley Cup, but Why are the Carolina Hurricanes or Winnipeg Jets today worse with the additions that they made than they were 6 weeks ago? They're not. The truth is these teams have an authentic chance to win on different levels, and the randomness of this game. You mentioned, frankly speaking, the new pod that I just had Carolina Hurricanes owner Tom Dundon on 2 weeks ago, and he said that they equate in their office the Stanley Cup playoffs to a series of 7-game coin flips. Like, think about how crazy that is.
What a business.
Well, that's his point. He said, look, there's hockey games being played next year and the year after that and the year after that. And guess what? I'm going to want to win those too. And that's why you see someone like Kevin Cheveldayoff get criticized. It almost feels like year after year. Like, you could probably just play the play button on the same mean tweets that you see floating through social media. But what I like about it is, at varying points over these last number of years, when it's required to take a big swing, he's gone and done it. Whether it was Paul Stastny the first time or Kevin Hayes, or go through the list. But then other times when he wants to sit on the sideline, I view the way that he manages this team as if he looks after the money and the picks and players as if it's his own. That the money going out the door and these futures are his kids. And that's the way that he runs this franchise, almost as someone who has a fiduciary responsibility to the long-term view of the team, that instead of being a team that's likely going to bottom out for a series of years, a slow bleed. The Jets played the Preds in the Western Conference Final in 2018. I was there. Or in the second round. That was the spiral of the Preds beginning to go down from Stanley Cup Final to second round to first to being outside of the playoffs. Guess which team has been sort of right in the mix the whole time? The Winnipeg Jets. And they're not going anywhere because they're probably going to remain competitive, because the next iteration after Blake Wheeler is going to be gone is probably still going to include some form of the younger guys that they've got, the Kyle Connors, the Nick Ehlers, whether Scheifele and Wheeler move on or Hellebuck is still there, they're still going to have enough pieces to be competitive.
Well, and that is certainly what people hope. And, they do have, that was the one thing when we were talking and hearing about some rumors about Meyer. The one guy that I think I'm certainly loath to move off from is the Jets' first rounder last year in Rucker McGroarty. He seems to be not only a great player, but also the type of culture carrier that I think this team really needs. And it was great to see him stick around. They do have Chaz Lucius and Brad Lambert. And, of course, Cole Perfetti's injured right now. There is some talented young players.
They hit on their picks. For the most part, they do.
Well, one guy they haven't on is Logan Stanley. And there was interesting.
I was just going to get there.
Yeah, give us what's your take on Stanley and his future, whether it's in Winnipeg or elsewhere? And what would his value be around the league, Frank? Because while the on-ice results haven't quite been there, he does have a pretty tantalizing toolbox to certainly some GMs in the game.
Yeah, he really does. Look, I'll tell you this. The best way to describe the skill set, I would say, or toolbox, is to just take a look at someone like Jordan Greenway, who was traded from to the Buffalo Sabres from the Minnesota Wild at the deadline. Jordan Greenway has 2 goals and 4 assists for 6 points this year. If he was 5'11", with 2 more years left on his contract at $3 million a year, we'd be talking about what the Minnesota Wild would have needed to pay to get off of Jordan Greenway's contract. Instead, because he's 6'6", there's a whole different slate of options that are open to him. And the Wild not only get off the contract, but they get a 2nd and a 5th round pick in return. And so that's sort of the neighborhood that I think Logan Stanley's living in at 6'6", is these guys that are big take a lot longer to develop and begin producing. And there's a wasteland of players that are of his size that have never amounted to anything. But there's also a whole crop of other players like a Jamie Alexiak, or go down the list of guys that have that frame that took Alexiak 8 years from his draft year to become a full-time bona fide NHL player. And I'm not saying it's going to happen with Stanley. All I'm saying is that it feels like, one, that is probably not going to happen in Winnipeg based on the way that this year has unfolded. And 2 is that he's one of those guys that is going to get himself ample extra opportunity when it's all said and done because of that frame that he has and because of that toolbox. So it's kind of a blessing and a curse for the Jets. The issue is that they have a piece that is still of value, and I believe that they were fielding calls on him. I don't think it's fair to say that he requested a trade, but to think that he's not open to the idea of playing more and getting more opportunity elsewhere, you'd be foolish to think that. So they didn't get something that they felt was of value in return for what they believe he still could be, but they also haven't done a very good job of unearthing it themselves.
Frank, you just mentioned the Jordan Greenway deal. I've got to ask you about the Wild because they've been playing very well. They are in a very unique situation. They bit the bullet. They've got massive cap penalties this year and 2 more seasons after that. Yet they've been competitive and still managed to make some pretty interesting deals at the deadline. Just thoughts on the job that Bill Guerin's doing right now.
It's bananas that team, which started with essentially a $68 to $70 million hard cap compared to everyone else at 82.5 or 83.5, whatever, they've been able to make it work and had cap space. They've done an incredible job of just saying, you know what? Our team is better off without those players. They bit the bullet, as you said, and it's a couple years old now. But to think that they were still managing to be competitive during this stretch, yeah, there's going to be 2 more hard years when that cap hit actually increases for the next 2 years to 14.7 million or something crazy like that. But they've found young players to contribute, and they've made smart flips in the meantime. Like, look at Cam Talbot for Philip Gustafsson and the numbers that Gustafsson has put up, basically second only to Linus Ullmark in the NHL this season. If you're able to do that and shave off $2 million plus bucks or whatever the number is, and have that happen, those are some of those smart bets that you make over and over again to the point where you can leverage a few free draft picks, which then you take those draft picks that you get for retaining some cap space and you turn them into, I don't know, a free bet on Gustav Nyquist, who's likely to come back before the end of the regular season, or what they did up front with Marcus Johansson. Are they a team kind of like the Jets that anyone views as an authentic, true, sort of top 5 Stanley Cup contender? Probably not. But I'd venture to argue that the same is true that it is with the Jets, that I don't really want to face them in the first round.
Yeah, they're we're going to see them in person on Wednesday, and that's a team the Jets have not had success with so far, at least on the Twin Cities, so should be an interesting one. Last one for you. We'll go to the East because that's where all the action was in and around the trade deadline, Frank. I mean, the Bruins are on course for a historic season right now. They have been the team to beat. But as you mentioned, it is going to be an absolute cage match pretty much in all of these rounds. Was there a team that you thought did the best job when it came to being aggressive to give them the best chance to win this year? And if not Boston, who, when we're handing the cup out at the end of the 2-month playoff tournament?
I still like Boston's ads. I mean, if we're talking short term, long term, I think the best play was still adding Timo Meier, because the Devils, I don't think they gave up any of their top prospects, and they were able to do it for a guy that they're probably going to keep for the next 7 to 8 years that can score you 40-plus goals a season in Meier. So he makes so much sense. But Boston, on a short-term basis, the Tyler Bertuzzi ad to me was the cherry on top. You have this guy that you bring in he's Brad Marchand light. He's got edge, he's got skill, and he's able to kind of put it all together in a way that just makes sense for this Boston team. To go with Dmitry Orlov, Bobby Orlov, who's been this incredible fit to this point, and the production right out of the chute, the chemistry just almost instantaneous, which you hardly ever see. That plus Garnet Hathaway, a nice depth addition. I thought the Boston Bruins did really well for themselves. The injuries to Taylor Hall and to Nick Foligno probably going to keep them out, likely a month, but still playoff contributors. That team, they're scary. They don't lose on home ice. They barely lose at all. It's hard to kind of stray. I hate the chalk pick. I never go with that when I make my Stanley Cup pick, but it's hard to sort of stray away from Boston, taking a really strong team and finding a way to improve them at the deadline.
Frank, listen, this has been so much fun having you on. Tons of great comments from folks appreciating you jumping on with us today. Obviously, fill us in on where we can get Frankly Speaking, but if people are not aware, give me a quick rundown of when you are in the rundown of what you're doing on Daily Faceoff before we get on the air every day over on the Daily Faceoff YouTube channel.
Yeah, it's a whole lot of stuff going on. So if you're into league-wide hockey content where you're placed, Daily Faceoff Live is on YouTube every day from 11 to 11:30 Central Time. And then I've got the DFO Rundown podcast Mondays and Thursdays with my co-host Jason Greger. And frankly speaking, the one-on-one interview series drops on Wednesdays. You can get all three of those things also on audio only wherever you get your podcasts. And Huss, just so great to be back with you. 500 episodes. Congratulations. What a milestone for you and Remo.
Hey, thanks a lot, Frank. I appreciate everything that you do, and it's must listen for me before we get going on WST. Quickly on the way out, people are wondering, what team is on your hoodie?
This is the Vermont Catamounts. My cousin is one of the assistant coaches there, and just always have followed the program, and happy to show a little support.
Always neat to see, a logo that people don't immediately catch right off the bat.
It's a Todd Woodcroft coached Vermont Catamounts, by the way.
Was just about to say a little bit of a Winnipeg connection on that. Frank, thanks so much for doing this. Let's catch up again soon. Appreciate you, my friend.
See you, Huss.
Good stuff. There is Frank Seravalli. You're already following on Twitter, but make sure you're following their YouTube channel. Give them a sub and check out DFO Live and everything else Frank has with the great team over at Daily Faceoff. All right, we are going to get to our good friend Jeff Hamilton from the Winnipeg Free Press in just a minute. Got to give a big shout out to our friends over at Royal Sports. I think everyone feeling a bit better about the playoff possibilities after what happened on Saturday night, both here and in Calgary. And maybe you're getting ready for a new jersey. Maybe you want a 62 Niederreiter. Maybe you want a 7 Nemetsnikov. Or maybe you just need some great new Jets gear or gear of your favorite team from a variety of sports. Royal Sports is, of course, the #1 fan headquarters superstore. Thousands of pieces of Jets merchandise, tons of Winnipeg Blue Bombers gear, and the best of NFL, Major League Baseball, NBA, all other National Hockey League teams, and, of course, international soccer as well. The biggest hockey superstore in town as well. $1 million stick inventory, 50% off on tons of Warrior sticks right now if you pop in there. Not to mention snowboards and more with spring break just around the corner. You got to see it for yourself. 750 Pembina Highway, Royal Sports, proud sponsors of ours from episode 1 to 500 here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. And check them out on Instagram as well at Royal Sports Pembina for their latest merchandise drops and sale information. Speaking of clothes, guys, if you need to step up the wardrobe, F Apparel in downtown Winnipeg is the spot with custom suits for men beginning at just $400. Custom shirts, both tucked and untucked styles, golf pants, chinos, and more. No one will make you look better than Andrew and his great staff down at F Apparel. What you can do is simply make an appointment at that's EPHapparel.com, or pop down and see for yourself. The whole process is pretty short, pretty painless, and next thing you know, we've got a beautiful made-to-fit custom suit. By the way, 15% off for wedding parties if you're involved in a wedding, for your suits for the big day, and a free custom shirt and tie with every custom suit for 2023 grads. Find out more at F Apparel today or online at fapparel.com. And a big shout out to our friends over at Boston Pizza. Great weekend hockey watching for Winnipeg Jet fans. And hey, there's no better place to do it other than the game itself than your local Boston Pizza. Jump on those great happy hour specials, ice cold schooners, world famous Boston wings, gourmet pizzas, and more. And if you can't make it out to BP tonight, you can always order online at bostonpizza.com. All right, we will talk a little bit more about tonight's game right now with Jeff Hamilton, but I know a few people were wondering. It does look like Pierre-Luc Dubois is going to be in the lineup. We'll hear from Dubois a little later on, and a little bit more from Rick Bowness on tonight's game before the end of the program. But let's continue episode 500 and welcome in a mainstay, one of our favorites, Jeff Hamilton of the Winnipeg Free Press. Hammer, how are you? What's good? How was the weekend?
Hustler, that's almost as good as my intro on the Kenny and Rennie show. You just need to get a music video. But it's an honor to be on. It always is an honor to be on. I know you've been getting the pats on the back and the congratulations. Holy smokes, 500 episodes. Can you believe it? I can't believe it, man. That's awesome. I might have to sharpen my pen and re-up one of those profiles for you guys I did after your 1-year anniversary.
Yeah, I think we still have it, actually. I think that's still on our pinned tweet. It was such a nice little ode from you.
One of my favorite stories of the year, that year, whatever it was.
So yeah, second birthday is Wednesday. This is sort of a crazy week of these two dates kind of coming just 2 days apart. But tell you what, it's been great having you on, and I'll tell you what, it's a bit better of a feeling as you can imagine. We do this every day. There's lots of ups and downs. I'm not sure as much of a roller coaster as the game itself on Saturday night. But man, for the Jets, for their fans, I can't remember a more desperately needed 2 points than the team got on Saturday after the deadline went and passed on Friday. And then, an absolute freaking disaster in Edmonton on Friday to get the weekend going.
Well, I think, for that very reason, Huss, in the sense that this team needed some good news. It didn't matter how that good news was going to be delivered. It didn't matter that it was a run-and-gun game, the kind of games you don't like to get involved in with the Edmonton Oilers. But it was a win, and right now this team needed a win in the worst way possible. So, back to changing that narrative a little bit. Was it a perfect game? Far from it. Was it a good enough game to win? Yes, it was. And you have Leon Draisaitl scoring a hat trick, but you do, for the most part, a good job shutting down Connor McDavid. Do your best, at least. Those players know that he's going to get his opportunities. And again, just one of those things to stop the bleeding. We don't know what exactly spoke to Friday's game. What was it a letdown? Were the players feeling let down from the inactivity over the deadline? Who knows? But this season, I felt like this was a defining weekend. And after that Friday, ass kicking that they got to come back and beat a good Oilers team on home ice, it at least puts some good feelings and a reminder to this team, what it feels like to win. Because for a while there, it was not fun going into the locker room, and certainly wasn't fun for these guys showing up every day and not getting the results.
Well, it was, especially, and you get a bit of help from the Minnesota Wild. Calgary, loses. You got 7 points on those teams. I guess 6 on Nashville. They've got the games in hand. But it does lead into tonight. And, I've been, as my stress levels have been increasing as the teams played poorly over the last month or so, and you start really, evaluating the landscape of the West and the division, and then look ahead, this stretch of schedule scared the hell out of me, frankly. The back-to-back games against Edmonton with the way that they were playing. You got the Wild in on Wednesday, Florida, Tampa, Carolina on the road, the Boston Bruins afterwards. It was a start for the Winnipeg Jets, but this game tonight against the San Jose Sharks, I would argue, must win. Nothing's really must win at this point, especially when you're in your spot, but considering the losses how they've piled up over the last little while, this is a game you simply have to have on home ice against a team that is already in next year territory.
Absolutely. I don't want to get too hyperbolic or take away some of the joy levels from the fans, but coming out on home ice again and falling flat against a horrible San Jose team is enough to just completely take away any good feelings that you got with the win against the Oilers. But that's going to be the case really for the rest of the season. The Jets are in a dogfight here. They need to be embracing these opportunities and certainly beating the teams they should be beating. But the schedule doesn't get much easier this month. There's certainly some teams on the card that suggest the Jets should win or maybe even be dubbed easier games. Well, this is also the time of year that those teams that aren't in the playoffs don't just pack things up and call it a season. They're there to play spoiler. If anything, there's almost I don't want to say a rejuvenation, because you're not going to be fighting for the Stanley Cup, but there is some kind of joy levels that you can get from eliminating teams like the Winnipeg Jets, who are on the brink of that final couple playoff spots. I know they're third in the Central now, and that's just shows what one win can do, how tight this Central Division and really Western Conference race is. So, but yeah, it's now that you got kind of injected those good feelings into the locker room. You got guys like Adam Lowry snapping their long goal streaks, Morgan Barron also in that group. You have guys like Nemestikov who come out and have, I thought for his game, thought he had a great debut as far as, all the circumstances and the quick turnaround in which he had to get on the ice. I thought he played a great game, having to shut down McDavid and company. And, I just think it's one of those things where you just need to get on a roll now. You've shifted the narrative slightly. Now time to run with it. You got a game here that you got to take seriously. You can't look, I know it's probably human nature to look towards Wednesday's affair against the Minnesota Wild and how big that one's going to be, especially with all the players the Wild picked up over the deadline. But right now, it's got to be game by game and picking up 2 valuable points against the San Jose team that spent much of their deadline getting rid of a lot of players on their team, setting up for a nice little 2-game win streak moving into the week. So we'll see what the Jets can do here.
Let's go back to Friday for a minute, or maybe the entire trade deadline. I mean, I won't rehash everything that I'd said last week, but I mean, I was kind of thinking that there might be, 1 or 2 depth moves to help a bottom 6 that had been essentially a black hole of scoring. Nemestikov was one of them. I was a little surprised there wasn't maybe one more. Some people were thinking blue line. I was still thinking bottom 6. I love the Niederreiter deal and the value that it provided for what was given up. Certainly some people, though, were expecting far more from the Winnipeg Jets. What were your expectations, and what do you think of what the Jets accomplished or didn't accomplish going into Friday afternoon?
Yeah, I think there was a bit of a brewing debate amongst us scribes on what we thought the Winnipeg Jets were going to do at the deadline. And the debate really only started within the last couple weeks before the deadline as the Jets took a nosedive in the standings and with their play. I think before that, I think we were all on the same page, and that Kevin Cheveldayoff had no other option but to be a buyer, that the Jets were going to be, if not in that first place spot in the Central and the West, fighting or within points of it, and trending the right way, just given the way they were playing. And then over the last few weeks here, that clearly did not unfold the way I think many people thought it would. And the Jets certainly dipped and started playing 500 hockey for last month, heading into the deadline. So I still felt that this was, I still found myself on the side of, believing that they would do something more, that they would be buyers, that at one point in time, they were playing pretty well in that conference, in that division, and that the West seems to be wide open as compared to the East. I mean, the sad reality for the East is only one team makes it to the Stanley Cup Finals. So, for everybody else but one team, it's not going to be worth much. That being said, I definitely dampened a little bit on that. I didn't think, and not because I didn't think the Jets should go out and get more pieces or get help. I think you could certainly look at these last 3 weeks and use it as a great argument that the Jets need help to compete. I just think it hurt their opportunity. I think, for players that might have been out there that were looking at teams to go to see what, whether, if they were on expiring contracts, and if they, we know everybody, the rental, it doesn't sound like a great opportunity, right, to ship up your family and move out or whatever, join a team. But it is a lot of opportunity for you to put some money in the bank with a good playoff run. And I think if you were one of those players, or any player, whether you had 1 year left or 2 years left or whatever, especially if you had a no movement clause, you start looking around the league at teams that you want to be a part of, and you look at the chaos that's going on in Winnipeg, and that's not in your list anymore. I imagine there were a handful of players that were looking at Winnipeg a month ago and being like, that looks like a pretty darn good team. If it doesn't work out where I am, what's a few months over on the prairies to play with a solid team that looks like it has a good shot to go deep into the playoffs. And I just don't think that happened. And it's interesting, right? You look at Kevin Cheveldayoff's press conference. I thought it was up there with some of his worst comments as far as not really sharing much information. I thought he danced around a lot of different things. I do think he was asked the questions I think a lot of fans wanted him to be asked, and he kept reverting back to we were as aggressive as we were able to be, and he kept saying that, and I had my hand up to ask a question before they did they called kind of a last question. So I wasn't able to ask it, but I just wanted to be like reading between the lines, like how much of, we talked about, or he mentioned, we asked and he answered about how he felt that the losing streak essentially going into the trade deadline didn't affect his approach, nor would it have been, More would have been if they were on an 8-game winning streak. And then again, reverting to that we were as aggressive as we could be. Well, I think he's telling us, without actually telling us, that last 3 weeks did screw up any kind of momentum or potential with the Jets. And I'm not trying to excuse Kevin Cheveldayoff. I mean, that's his job, is to work around that and to be savvy, and especially with all the issues we hear about Winnipeg and maybe players not wanting to come here and some of the other stuff that goes against this team. You need to find a guy who can do that. But I do think over the last couple weeks that, as aggressive as we were able to be, really spoke volumes about how the team had performed in front of them and the willingness for players to either waive no movement contracts or come here. I know a lot of fans will be like, well, there was players out there with no movement, they didn't have those clauses in their contracts. Well, I look at a guy like Jacob Chychrun, and a guy I think the Jets were in on, and we're in on pretty heavily. I think in those situations, when you have, unless the Jets are going to give a package, and we all know Kevin Cheveldayoff doesn't like getting ripped off or seemingly losing a trade. If the Jets ask isn't significantly better than another teams, I have no doubt in my mind they go to Jacob Chychrun and they go, where would you rather play? That allows the player to be a little bit in on it. I don't think he gets a ton of say of where he goes, but gives him a little bit of say on where he goes. And then, when he does leave, he's not trashing the Arizona Coyotes for how they handled him.
Yeah, the entire Chychrun saga was bizarre because, this is a guy that we'd been talking about him being on the block a year ago. And it took so long for him finally to get dealt. And by all accounts, the return to the Ottawa Senators was surprising because of what wasn't there. I know Elliott reported there was multiple teams that had more than 2 first-round picks on the table, and they end up going for the 1 pick and the 2 second-rounders. If anything, I think Bill Armstrong was just betting against the Ottawa Senators that this pick that they're going to get from Ottawa will be significantly better than the others in a very, very important draft. As far as the other guys go, I'm trying to just think about players that were moved. I guess a guy like Kane had a full no move. Can't remember what Tarasenko's move was, but again, within the division, more likely St. Louis is going to trade a guy out there. But the Meyer conversation, I think, was tantalizing for many reasons. He would have been a big, big upgrade into the top 6. And again, you would have him under team control for another year and could figure out how that goes forward. The one thing, though, and I've heard this from others, I'm not sure it's necessarily a reason not to do it, but it does compound the huge to-do list for the general manager come the end of this season, regardless of how everything plays out, Jeff, because as we talked about with Frank, that 2-year window is actually one, because you need some clarity on these assets and figuring out what's happening, whether they're going to be here long-term or whether they're not. And if they're not, we could be looking at the most impactful few weeks around the draft when it comes to player movement for the Winnipeg Jets, because you would have to think that if you're going to maximize the value of those assets, of a Pierre-Luc Dubois, for instance, time is of the essence because it is ticking. Although, I guess if you're prepared to trade him at the deadline, depending on what happens next year, as we've seen this year, there's always guys that'll overpay for a player like that come deadline.
Yeah, I do think that there is some sense to the argument that, especially if you believe, and just to be clear, I wasn't expecting Kevin Cheveldayoff to go all in here. The all in words were used quite a bit hanging in there. And I never found myself as one of those guys who felt they should go all in, because I think you got a pretty good idea over the last few weeks that all in, that kind of moved a little bit. Like all in, like think about how many players the Winnipeg Jets need to compete with some of the best teams in the conference. I think they need more than than a top end defenseman than a top, a top 6 forward. They needed a couple different pieces. They needed more veteran pieces on the blue line. They clearly needed more veteran pieces depth wise up front. So I wouldn't argue with that part. Back to my original point, I think that it makes some sense that if you were looking towards the future and building around, whether it be a new core, moving some pieces out, getting some guys with term, I do think the Winnipeg Jets explored guys that had term on their deals, that looked at how can we, again, like a Nino Niederreiter, yes, he only has 1 extra year on that, but that's 1 extra year to show Nino Niederreiter that Winnipeg is the place to be and maybe get him at a good contract here in Winnipeg. I think that's why things didn't work out for the Winnipeg. I'd argue that's why things didn't work out for the Winnipeg Jets, is because they tried to go for guys with tenure and just couldn't either weren't on the no movement trade list or couldn't get a deal done. Again, that's your job. You should have to do that. In the grand scheme of things, though, I don't think you really want to get, because let's be honest here. I mean, we've been talking about it for quite a bit. There's going to be a massive garage sale this summer. There kind of has to be. I mean, this core is not going to be constructed, the way it is right now heading into next season. I don't think it can, because I think a lot of the writing's on the wall with the inactivity over this deadline. I think there's a handful of players there that got their answer, that this window will be closing probably in the next couple of years, unless they can do some savvy moves over the summer and maybe upgrade that to a retool and get a couple different pieces, because you still have some pieces in there. That will all depend, of course, on what you can get back for guys like Pierre-Luc Dubois, Mark Scheifele, Connor Hellebuck. And the reality is you weren't going to deal. And I don't, like we talked about this last week, Huss, the potential, and that it certainly, I think, had certainly crept into the conversation as far as maybe trading a core piece, which just goes to show you just how terribly the Jets were playing leading up to the trade deadline. But I countered last week, I think it was that you do that, you're pretty much ending it right now. I mean, including this season. And I don't think that was what the Winnipeg Jets believe. I don't think that's what Kevin Cheveldayoff wanted for this season. I truly do believe he thinks and believes in this team. I think he has to. And maybe that's just a message because he didn't do much at the deadline, that it falls on these players. But the reality is you're going to need some time to really get some of these deals in play. For the Jets, if you want to open that or keep that window open, you're going to have to trade these players for players. And the only reason that happens is if you have enough time to go to, said player, whether it be a Pierre-Luc Dubois, whether it be a Mark Scheifele, whether it be a Connor Hellebuck, and have conversations with other teams about allowing them to sign an extension once they get there. And just to have those kind of conversations right now, because they weren't having those conversations in the weeks leading up to the trade, and so to have those to just kind of turn on a fly and try to get rid of an integral piece takes a lot more time and savviness and due diligence to do that, not just with the other teams you're trying to deal with, but with the player themselves. And that's what I think is going to be the reality of this summer. That after this year, whatever happens to the Winnipeg Jets, if they can, punch their ticket to the playoffs, whatever happens in the, whatever does happen in the postseason, I think really is irrelevant. That we're going to be looking at some massive changes here. And that's really, as much as we wanted to evaluate Kevin Cheveldayoff, and for sure we should be evaluating him on what he didn't do this trade deadline, it's going to really be this summer. He kind of pushed it off to be this summer on really whether or not, and I'd argue if he's going to be here in the long term and to see this new era, if you will, or new leadership group blossom under his tutelage.
Well, and those decisions made around those players, and some of it is out of his hands, but how they handle that, honestly, is going to be crucial for this next number of years in Winnipeg. And that's why it'll be such an interesting time for those of us that follow the team. Back to the present. Friday was a complete disaster. They come back out, and interestingly enough, Rick Bowness sort of very clearly and publicly throwing Logan Stanley and maybe more notably Nate Schmidt in the press box as healthy scratches and bringing in not only Sandberg and Capobianco. And it was quite a topic amongst other players. The players that spoke afterwards spoke to it. And again, credit to Nate Schmidt for being there, apparently giving a big high five to Capobianco for scoring the goal. But I could have made an argument that there were plenty of top veterans on this team that might have been deserving of a spot in the press box at times over the last month. But Nate Schmidt was the guy. How did you take that, and what did you think about what Bones had to say about that move? Because that is one of the clubs in his bag that he hasn't pulled out at all very much this year, with the exception of, younger players at the bottom of the lineup.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Nate Schmidt has not been maybe terrific of late. I don't know if he's been, necessarily the GOAT to look after or make an example of. So be it if that's what Rick Bowness believes he did by sending a message and putting him up in the press box. I think he picked the best possible guy to do that to, because I don't think Nate Schmidt's going to come back and, be be an angry human being anymore, like change his personality. I think he, whether other players wanted to see that as a wake-up call or whether it was just to give, Capobianco an opportunity to play. I mean, the guy scored, right? I mean, he's been playing decent hockey when he's been in the lineup, and it's been a curious case for him for a while as this team has kind of, again, has nosedived over the last few weeks so that he hasn't got an opportunity to get in. And not really much of a surprise for Logan Stanley sitting out. I mean, he's going to be a bubble guy and in and out of the lineup, I imagine, for the rest of the season. But, I mean, as much as it was interesting to see, that he was a healthy scratch, because when you see Nate Schmidt not in the lineup, your immediate assumption is he must be banged up or must be going through something. So, whether that's a message, again, you heard Josh Morris, you heard players talk about it afterwards as being somewhat of a message, but I just don't know if he's the guy that, it will resonate as much as, say, if you were to sit like a Neil Pionk down and say you haven't been liking his game, or anyone, any number of guys up front who haven't necessarily put in the work ethic or have met the expectations over the last few weeks. But again, I mean, I think this is going to be his tool. I don't think he can wield that tool too much to this team. We've seen how fragile they've been over this stretch. I think at this point, I think you just want to give some fresh legs in there too. I mean, I think you could have easily got away with saying, not that you want them to fib or anything like that, but what would, and healthy scratch is an interesting thing too. Like, is it you're punished, you're a healthy scratch, or hey, we got this guy here who's been putting in the time and effort and work all season long.
Well, considering what happened Friday, I think it's pretty clear. Exactly. It was a straight up, listen, you guys stunk. We're going to put some other guys in there. And
exactly.
It could have been half the team.
And hey, where does Nate Schmidt find himself on the depth chart? The third line. So third period. So it's not exactly like it's an impossible move by him. So again, I do think it makes sense. I do think it does send somewhat of a message, but we'll see what the real messages will be sent when some of the, I'd say, the more top end guys take a seat and don't dress for a game. We haven't quite seen that level of display from Bowness so far.
No, it was like almost it was a move of a player that has that maybe stature and level of service and paycheck, but not one of those guys. And of course, a lot easier said than done when Pierre-Luc Dubois is out of the lineup and Kevin Stenlund centering your second line. But what have you thought about the struggles of Scheifele, Kyle Connor, Nikolai Ehlers over the course of, the past month or so? I mean, we've spent a lot of time talking about how the bottom six hasn't scored, and they haven't, and that was a huge part of, getting that win was getting some, goals from Barron and Lowry and Capobianco. And I mean, Scheifele got that tip in early on. He also served up a piping hot double pepperoni to Leon Draisaitl in his own end that ended up in the back of the net. I mean, there has been some good and some bad from these players, but the offense from particularly Kyle Connor and Nikolai Ehlers has really dried up. And I know Ehlers spoke about that today when he met the media before tonight's game against the Sharks.
Yeah, so a couple things. I mean, one thing, look, I understand how upset. We'll just go on the Ehlers thing here. I understand how upset people are with Nikolai Ehlers' ice time, and especially with with the underlying analytics he has, with the eye test alone. I mean, he's a solid player and needs to be playing more than 12 minutes. I mean, he logged just under 12 minutes Saturday against the Oilers, and that might not be enough. But anyone who thinks that this guy's going to get up towards 18 or 20, I mean, I interviewed him in January in Toronto during that 5-game road trip. He'd been back for a few games by then. He was firing at a more than a point per game clip, and he's still close to that right now. I mean, I went there to do a story about how wonderful this player has been able to bounce back from a tough injury, because I was just basing it all on his stats. It took about 30 seconds into our conversation where my direction of my story was changing, because Nikolai Ehlers didn't like his game. Didn't think he, felt like he had a lot more to give, and that it was nice to get the points and all that, but that came more out of opportunity than out of excellence, if you will. I mean, Nikolai Ehlers is coming back from a sports hernia injury that's not easy to come back from, and while you'd love to see the guy log more ice time, and certainly is a very important piece to this team, especially when he's at full health, he's still very much working his way back in. And Mike's doing a story on today, as you mentioned. Nikolai Ehlers talked to the media this morning. He's still calling it a work in progress. This was almost 2 months ago that I did this interview with him in Toronto. So I think you got to bear with both Nikolai Ehlers and Rick Bowness here. I mean, I'm not trying to say that this guy doesn't deserve more opportunity. I think we've been saying that for years, and that's probably why, a lot of fans are up, arms up in the air, is because the reality is he's kind of been shortchanged under the previous coach too. And so you wonder, kind of what's going on here. I still think the best is yet to come for Nikolai Ehlers. I think as he gets more comfortable, with the game speed, again, I know that's wild talking about it 2 months later, 2.5 months after he's returned, but that's the reality of a sports hernia injury, where you're not as explosive. There's some guys that I don't want to say don't come back from these kind of things, but aren't the same player. Certainly, we've seen Nikolai Ehlers, the point producer. I think what we need to see from Nikolai Ehlers, or what he's trying to get to, is being that freewheeling player through 60 minutes, rather than just for a little bit here, a little bit there. And so part of that obviously falls on Nikolai Ehlers. Part of that falls on the coaching staff to get him up to speed and get him in position where he's playing some of his best hockey, because they need Nikolai Ehlers to be Nikolai Ehlers to be successful in the playoffs. As for the other players, I mean, Kyle Connor's a little bit trickier. It's weighing on him. No one likes to score more than Kyle Connor. So when he goes through the droughts and the kind of droughts he's going through right now, it certainly weighs on you. You definitely see a bit of a, I don't want to say I'm not going to pretend like I know this guy in and out, but you definitely see a little more glum faces in the locker room. And same thing with Mark Scheifele. And it seems like with this team, when it rains, it pours. That when things don't go well, they don't go well for a while. But on the flip side, when things are going well, these two guys, whether it be, three guys who we just mentioned, are all at the top of the rung here, finding the back of the net and being difference makers. I think, as you mentioned too, Huss, we talk a lot about the bottom six not getting things done. And it's easy to look at the bottom six and tell them they need to do more. And in a lot of cases for this team this year, they have had to, especially when you look at earlier in the season. It was the bottom six that was really getting, in some ways and in some games, setting the tempo and style in which this team wants to play. That's obviously dipped over the last few months here. We talked about Adam Lowry snapping his goal drought at 35 games. You see, Morgan Barron again, 20 games. Those guys can't go that long. But if you're going to be a successful team in this league, your big horses need to carry you. And the reality is, through this losing streak before Saturday's win, the big guns were not carrying this team. They were not doing the things that you expect your big guns to do. And that's the fascinating part about a couple of these players. Mark Scheifele coming up for a new contract in 2 years. I mean, if this guy can't put a team on his back and win games every once in a while, is he really worth $10-11 million? In his next contract, $8-9 million. I mean, if you can't put a team on your back every once in a while and not have it kind of come to you on the power play and stuff like that, if you can't be a 5-on-5 dominating player, you don't deserve those kind of paychecks. So I don't know. I think, for sure, if the Jets are going to be a successful team this year, those guys need to be going. Obviously, you want to play complementary hockey. You want to have depth scoring. You can't have your third line go as dormant unless they're strictly a shutdown line and are doing that, night in and night out, which hasn't exactly been the case for that third line. So they do need to be scoring, but the big guns need to be going. And as concerning as it is in any time of the season, I think it's even more concerning down this stretch here as the Jets need to make waves here, need to find themselves in a battle in that Central Division standings and still have an opportunity to fight for first. I think that's what's being lost in all this, is the doom and gloom has come in about maybe not even making the playoffs. Well, a hot run here by the Winnipeg Jets could land them in first place in the Central and home ice advantage here down the stretch. Now Dallas is escaping away, but if there's any chance for Winnipeg to catch up or to fight for that spot, it's going to come on the backs of their top guns, not their complementary players, even if they do need to up their games too.
Yeah, I mean, Dallas hasn't run away with anything, although they do have wins in their last three after just a long stretch of losing, but in overtime where they were getting a point. And I'm not sure that the best team in the Central Division right now, and maybe the West, isn't the Minnesota Wild with the way that they're playing. And we're going to see them front and center on Wednesday night. 8-1-1 in their last 10, 4 wins. And interestingly enough, much like I think we sort of made that hypothesis that the way the Jets had played maybe turned management away from making significant moves, I think the opposite happened in Minnesota. I think the way that his team is playing, despite the fact that they've got this massive, $12 million cap penalty, at the start, they were nipping their feet in the water and grabbing a couple extra later picks for being that third team in a couple of trades. And then all of a sudden, Bill Guerin got active. I mean, Johansson, and then, of course, the Klingberg ad. And, once they got Ryan Reeves, I think Jordan Greenway was more expendable. I couldn't believe a 2-goal player got a 2nd rounder and a 5th rounder, but I think that speaks to the market for strength, size, aggressiveness at this time of the year. We've talked a lot about Logan Stanley and what his value is. Frank Seravalli made a great point. Look at what Jordan Greenway, the price that Buffalo paid to get him. But this Minnesota team, I know we're all expecting Colorado just to rise to the top. I'm not sure if maybe one of the toughest outs in the entire West isn't going to be the team the Jets are hosting Wednesday night.
Absolutely, and I was gonna say exactly what you just led into. I think what didn't happen for the Jets, or what the Jets had hoped to happen leading into the trade deadline, happened for the Minnesota Wild. I'm not saying teams were necessarily Xing off the Wild as a place to go to, but given their play earlier, before they kind of went on a run, they were kind of all over the place. They weren't playing, incredibly great hockey, or weren't suggesting that they were going to be potentially go deep into the playoffs. Now look at them in their fight for, in the Central, and then adding those key pieces, adding size, adding scoring to an already pretty disciplined team. They got the guy in net. They got a blue line that's decent. They play a defensive game, and now they've added some power up front and some goal scoring up front as well as on the back end. I mean, that makes them, easily one of the teams out there to look after, to watch out for, especially in the way that they're playing. I mean, they're feeling really good about their game at the best possible time, with about 20 games left in the regular season. And then, a lot can happen with that momentum going into the playoffs when you're feeling really good about it. I mean, this is something that we were painfully talking about last year, right? When the Jets were clinging to a playoff spot. They were clinging mathematically to a playoff spot, and it was always like, well, there's still time left. There's still time left around this time. And mathematically, there was time left. But was there – I mean, I guess the good news was that if they did end up getting a playoff spot, they would fix that problem that, you just kind of being a good team, not backing into the playoffs, playing some of your best hockey, right?
Yeah, they would have had to have been the hottest team in the league just
exactly.
to get there.
It would have – yeah, it sounds – the argument was sound at the time, in the sense that if you could get both – but that, it's very difficult, as we've seen, for this team or any team in the NHL to just flip on a switch and play better. The Jets are finding, if the Jets can find momentum now, this is the time where you need to start turning things around. You can't say 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 games from now, there's still 10 games and we find ourselves in a playoff position. We need to get going. Yes, anything can happen in the playoffs, but you want to be playing well. You want to be bringing those good vibes in. You want to be bringing that confidence. And what you're seeing with the Minnesota Wild team is confidence up and down the lineup, having fun because they're winning games. And that's what the Jets need to get back to. And what the situation you want to be in as you enter, the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, listen, they just need to focus on one game, and that's tonight against the San Jose Sharks. Try and get another 2 points, start getting some positive momentum, and then see how they can do against some of the best teams in the league that they'll be playing against in the next week and a half. Hey, Hammer, before we go, been a little quiet around the Canadian Football League and the Bombers post-free agency. I know you've always got a pulse on the Bomber beat. What's next? What are you paying attention to? What are the key times and dates for the Bomber offseason as we look ahead, and can't wait to get the players back for training camp and back to IG Field?
Well, how about that news that the Winnipeg Blue Bombers will be hosting the Grey Cup in 2025? That's what is that, just in time for my math sucks. So 23, 24, 25. So your 6th Grey Cup appearance and 5th win. Is that what the Bombers are going for?
Now we're talking.
To wrap it up with Zach Collaros, or will Zach Collaros sign a 3-year extension prior to that? Who knows? That's the last year that he's under contract with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. So that's interesting. Anyways, back to present day. Yeah, I don't think. I expect there's to be some moves made. I've been hearing some kind of rumblings that, like, maybe there's some upgrading going on in the kicking game. I know some fans will be like, what? Like, where? Who? I do think there's an effort.
Who's the kicker is the number one question. Remember last offseason when every single day in chat, 20 people would ask who the new play-by-play voice of the Jets is when we knew Dennis was retiring? Now it's who's the kicker this year? Now that Kyle's done such a great job of taking care of most of the rest of the lineup.
That I don't have an idea of. I just know that I don't think they're done in trying to finalize their team, whether that means just more scouting trips. I know there's an emphasis, there's an effort to be made at improving the kicking game. That's really, in my opinion, the only area of the roster that sticks out. I mean, we're talking about a defense that brought back significant amount, number of pieces and has their leadership group there. We're talking about an offense that somehow got better and was able to keep, Rasheed Bailey after signing Kenny Lawler. I mean, the offense is on point. Obviously, Zach Claris is the leader of that group, and he's up for 3 more years. So there's a lot of good things up and down the roster and special teams as well. But it's that kicking game that I keep harping on them and wondering if anything's going to get done. And my gut tells me that something's going to get done, and it's going to, I think fans, are probably going to be pretty happy. I know that's vague, and I wish I had more details to offer on that front, but I do think there's a real effort to capitalize on this season. And if you're looking at building in any area as it stands right now for this team, I think kicking's a clear and obvious place to upgrade. So that's where I'm expecting that.
Hey, just quickly on that note of the Bombers getting the 2025 Grey Cup. How significant is that for the organization? I mean, I know it can certainly be a financial windfall. I think it also recognizes what this team and this organization's done over the last little while. And of course, you got the potential for hopefully getting to the game and playing in it. But big picture, as far as this team operates, it's a pretty big deal, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And it's way different now, right? So it's no longer, so the way they used to do things, at least before their new way, used to just be like, oh, you didn't get the Grey Cup in a long time. It's your turn to make money. Okay, it's your turn to make money. Okay, it's your turn to make money. So if you look at the math right now, I mean, the Bombers would kind of fall into that category had that that method still being utilized. I mean, they haven't hosted the Grey Cup since 2015, so they would be in line for that. Whatever, in a 9-team league, but now you got to put your pitch together. Now it's on how do you benefit the league? How do you benefit the league as a whole, and really puts in some competition for who wants to put on the biggest party. Now, even before the Bombers were getting things right on the field, they always kind of knew how to throw events, right? I mean, game day experience, but was fixed well before the Bombers' on-field performance was fixed, particularly at IG Field. So I mean, as far as significance comes, I think it's an added special element because let's face it, in 2015 when the Bombers hosted, the Bombers were kind of, for lack of a better term, a little bit of the laughing stock of the league. Hadn't won, a Grey Cup in a long time. Had been a team that was on the longest drought and so on and so forth. And so I think while it doesn't necessarily maybe change opinions outside of Manitoba, I think there's a point of pride for the Bombers as they become the class of the CFL for this province and city to host it. I think I think that Wade Miller and company will put on a great event. There's no doubt about that. But I also think that, because of the success the Bombers have had and been a team not just to cheer for on the field, but off the field, I think you're going to see local fans embrace it, unlike we've seen in the past. So I think that all just culminates into what will be a terrific event, a week-long event. I've been to the last X amount of Grey Cups since 2015. A big important ingredient to the Grey Cup is obviously putting on a big show. So a lot of that falls on the city, a lot of it falls on the team, city and province, tourism, stuff like that, and putting on a show. But you also need to have the home fans really deliver from that perspective and really feel like you're at a Grey Cup league. You definitely got that in Regina a little bit last season, but they were certainly a dumpster fire throughout the regular season, so there was a bit of a down to that. But certainly in Winnipeg, you're going to have that momentum. You're going to have a lot of fun, and all those things considered, I think it's just going to be a terrific event and maybe perhaps long overdue. And I joke about the Bombers being there 6 years in a row, but who's to say that's impossible to happen? And certainly I think you can use it as a negotiating piece to bring up, to bring in some players maybe in that year in case some of your older players move on from now to then.
No, it is a great point. Hammer, great convo as always. We're so appreciative of your contributions to WST through 500 shows, and here's to many more. Thanks for doing this. We'll catch up later this week.
Yeah, Hutz, here's to the next 500, and of course, big shout out. I know you give them a ton of credit, but the people who tune in every day and give us the gears and cheer us on and tear us down and build us up are really what this is all about. So shout out to them too.
You know it. Great stuff, Hammer. And speaking of that, we've been pushing 500 most of the last hour with us in the live chat right now. If you're new, welcome to the program. Make sure you've hit that red subscribe button. And while you're at it, folks, hit the thumbs up. Big show today for us. Certainly will help us spread the word. Speaking of spreading the word, Don't forget, everybody, 3 weeks Wednesday is the second ever Winnipeg Sports Talk Sports Trivia Night at Little Brown Jug. Seating is limited, so get your tickets now. I've just dropped the chat into the link into the chat, so jump on that, grab your tickets, and hope to see you all there. Would be interesting to see. The link's also in the description of the video. If you're looking at this afterwards, pop in there, grab your tickets. We're curating the questions as we speak, so we'll look forward to seeing you there. We are going to get back to tonight's game against the Winnipeg Jets, but a big, big thank you to our great friends at Princess Auto for their support of Winnipeg Sports Talk. And, of course, the Reed Carruthers rink with a big win yesterday to get to 2-2. They're back at it today or later on. Did lose this morning to the Kevin Cooey rink. So 2-2 so far for the Carruthers rink, and Cooey rolling right now at 4-0. Great start for Manitoba. And Matty Dunstone, who's 2-0, and they'll be taking on Jamie Cooey actually this afternoon as we speak. Can tell you that he's cruising right now. Actually, they gave up 3 in the third end, scored 4 in the fourth, stole 2 in the fifth, 7-3 Manitoba up on the Northwest Territories. Princess Auto is, of course, a great sponsor of curling from coast to coast. The Princess Auto Players Championship coming up in the Grand Slam a little later on this year. And the Princess Auto is the place where you'll find the best deals on the most unique assortment of tools and equipment around. Everything you need to complete the projects on your list or start something new is at Princess Auto. 2 Winnipeg locations, Panet Road, Portage Avenue West, and you can always shop online 24/7, 365 at princessauto.com. A huge thanks to the wonderful people at Culligan Water, family owned for over 65 years in business here in Winnipeg and southern Manitoba, for their great support of Winnipeg Sports Talk. Culligan are the go-to folks for all things water-related. They got water softeners, filters, bottled water coolers, whole home systems, drinking water systems, and citywide water delivery services, not to mention commercial and industrial water products and solutions. Pop down and see them at 1200 Sargent Avenue. You can give them a call at 694-5180. You can always check out everything they can do for you and your family when it comes to water online at drinkculligan.com. And a big cheers to our friends at Canadian Club and Beam Suntory on a great Winnipeg Whiskey Fest. Of course, Canadian Club was the title sponsor of the annual event, which went off to another rousing success in support of the Manitoba Sports Hall of Fame. I know we were just talking Bombers with Jeff Hamilton. They are, of course, the official spirit of the Bombers, and we'll look forward to having a few CCs and a few CC and ginger ales at IG Field as soon as humanly possible when the snow gets melted. Pick up Canadian Club, Canada's favorite Canadian whiskey, at your local Manitoba liquor marts. All right, let's get Michael Remis back in here. And Remo, a big thanks to Ken007. Very nice super chat. Congrats on 500. Cheers for the next 500. Thanks so much, Ken. Greatly, greatly appreciated that. And, man, hell of a show, Remo, for 500. We beat 500 in the chat, and great stuff from both Frank Seravalli and Jeff Hamilton before we get back to a little bit more from the Jets heading into tonight's game.
Yeah, wow. I thought we'd have a bit of a dip since last week leading up to the deadline, but we really haven't seen it as we march towards the playoffs. A ton of people here. We've already hit 200 likes, so thank you all for doing that. And some great info from Frank. A lot of positive messages in the chat about his appearance, and someone was asking if he was I don't know if he was our first show. He might have been on the second or third. And so I think we had him on last year for our anniversary as well. So good info. A good time to have Frank on us after the deadline. Good info about Logan Stanley, comparing him to Jordan Greenway, which I thought was interesting. He's 6'6", Stanley 6'7", and about the Jets' moves at the deadline as well. So great chatting with Frank.
Yeah, and I mean, I still do maintain, I think, you know, if and when Logan Stanley is traded from the Winnipeg Jets, whether it's coming back for players or whether it is for picks, I think there still will be a market for the big guy, although He was a first rounder. I'm not sure whether that's coming back, but it was a great comparison, I think, for that type of player with that sort of size and toolbox as to what the value is around the National Hockey League. Let's get back to this game tonight, though, because we did spend some time talking about the weekend that was, the ugly loss on Friday and the big comeback roller coaster win on Saturday night in an amazing atmosphere at Canada Life Centre. But they're right back at it tonight, Remo, and this is a game against a team that is going nowhere this season that the Winnipeg Jets absolutely have to have.
Oh, yes. So this is a rebuilding year for the Sharks. Traded away their top line scorer in Timo Meier. They work toward a rebuild. Erik Karlsson having this historic season. He did 100 points as a defenseman. Good to see him, back into form. We thought maybe Matt Cook had damaged his Achilles permanently forever, and he wouldn't be the player he was with Ottawa since then. I know Eugene Melnyk was always brought that one up, but great to see him back having a good season. So we saw McDavid the other night, top forward. Now you get the top defenseman and Karlsson. But it's not a great year for the Sharks, and you hope the Jets can take advantage. And it is Kyle Connor's bobblehead night, and we'll have to see how that. I do have some bobblehead stats, but here's the lines from Ken. Jets getting some help in the line area. We got Connor, Scheifele, Niederreiter, Ehlers, Dubois, Wheeler, Barron, Lowry, Nemesnikov, Menelainen, Stanley, Appleton. The extra forwards, Axel Jonsson-Fjallby, who did score in Friday's game, and I actually tweeted out among the bottom six. He was leading them all in points, despite playing less games than basically everyone after being sent down to the Moose. So I've been kind of puzzled by his scratch. But he is a scratch with Gustafsson and Gagne. They're the extras. Morrissey, Pionk, Dylan DeMello, Stanley, and Nate Schmidt back in. And the extras, Stanley, Kuhlman, Kyle Capobianco. He didn't skate us. And they asked him after. He said, Kyle's sick. And then Mike tried pressing Bones. And was like, well, let's say Kyle was here. Would he be in instead of Schmidt? And we play the clip, but he's just like, well, he's not here, so I don't need to answer that question. You're not going to get me here, Mike McIntyre. And Rittich is starting as well.
It does change that conversation, because I thought that, Capobianco, I thought, had a really strong game and, of course, scored that goal. And I'm with you on Axel. I think Axel has been playing his ass off the last little while. He has been, the one guy that's actually been in the mix on a few of the goals. He has been a part of the penalty kill. I was a little surprised that he'd be going out. I mean, I guess at this point it's coming down to Menelainen. I don't think it's going to be Kevin Stenlund, considering what he's been able to do in the faceoff circle. And I guess with Appleton going back in the lineup, guys have to come out. But the other guy that I think we have to give a little bit of credit to for a real strong game, Remo, was David Gustafsson. I thought Gustafsson played really well on Saturday night, and I'm not sure how close people were paying attention, but as the Jets were holding on to that 1-goal lead in the last 3 and 2 minutes of the game, Gus was out there along with Saku Menelainen. So they obviously made a pretty nice impression on the coach. But that's what that game on Saturday night was all about. It was about everybody stepping up, playing a little bit better, and finally some results for those guys in the bottom six, and nobody happier than Adam Lowry to get off the schneid. And man, Morgan Barron was buzzing as well. Didn't really like his game, or really most of the players' games on Friday night, but I thought both of those guys came back, and they seem to be really, really helped by their new line mate, Vlad Nemesnikov, who was very noticeable, especially in the defensive end, as they were trying to limit the opportunities of Connor McDavid, which I thought they did quite well.
Well, he didn't score. Although Draisaitl, he had a couple, but hey,
the other guy did okay.
Yeah, the other guy did okay. So I don't know. They did allow. I'm kind of curious about the defense, as they've allowed like 5 goals a game the last bit, and I don't think a lot of that is on the goalies. Like some of these chances Connor Hellebuyck has faced are, especially going back to that Colorado game and the Islanders game, like the whole team didn't, they were asleep, was the bonus line. So I'm kind of curious what the goals against will be like, because they've talked about improving the defense. They got Nemesnikov. I know you were playing like a juggernaut offense in the Oilers, but This is the San Jose Sharks here, and you can't be allowing 5 a game. And what you had Kopitar score. Was it 4 against the Jets? Yeah, it was 4. Yeah, so
that was 4.
Not ideal, and we'll see what happens here with San Jose.
Well, and it's going to be Dave tonight, so we're going to need to see big save Dave, not occasional save Dave. And of course, we do have a matchup with the top 2 scoring defensemen in the National Hockey League. Erik Karlsson, first on the season with 80 points, 19 goals, 61 assists in 63 games. And then next up in the entire National Hockey League, Josh Morrissey, 15 goals, 51 assists for 61 points. Rasmus Dahlin next up, then Dougie Hamilton. And, Adam Fox, former Norris Trophy winner, I mean, he's played the same amount of games as Josh Morrissey, 10 goals, 47 assists, 57 points. Just speaks to what an amazing season that Josh has had so far. And even Cale Makar isn't at a point-a-game pace where Josh Morrissey is so far. So, this game's on. Is this game on national TV?
Yeah,
it's a 6:30 game.
Yeah, Monday
I know the
night.
Edmonton Buffalo game is also a little earlier, although it couldn't be starting at 5:30 in Edmonton, could it?
According to my Score app, it's on Sportsnet 1, and Rennie said that they got the next couple games because they play Monday, Wednesday, which are national nights, and then Saturday against the Panthers, so that's a national game, and then Tuesday in the Hurricanes. But yeah, it's on. I saw on my Score app, that you go and you scroll to the bottom, it says what network it's on. Sportsnet 1.
Yeah,
we're not on the main.
What time is it at?
Oh, 6:30. 6:30.
So it's starting at 5:30 in Edmonton.
No. I'm talking about the Jets game. You're talking about the Oilers game?
Yeah.
That game is at 5:30 in Edmonton, correct. But 6:30 Eastern.
Wow, that is...
Well, it would be 5 Eastern. It would be... The Eastern games normally start at 6. So it would be start at 5 in Edmonton. It's in Buffalo, the game.
Oh, it's in Buffalo?
Yeah, it's in Buffalo.
Oh, sorry. I thought the game was in Edmonton. I'm like, man, that's weird. A 5:30 game at home? Jeez, that doesn't work. Anyways, bottom line is if you're going to the game tonight, it's Kyle Connor bobblehead night. So make sure you get your bobblehead and make sure you show up for 6:30 because it's not a 7 o'clock start. I just noticed that when I was looking at my tickets earlier today.
I'll say this about Morrissey. People are joking, chat. Why didn't we have a Morrissey versus Karlsson board ad promoting this one? But we didn't because it's Kyle Connor. They already have a promotion, Kyle Connor bobblehead name. But if there's any doubt about Morrissey being the captain, this is what sealed it for me, Hustler. On Saturday night, it's Wasack night. Amazing pregame ceremony. They're wearing the warm-up jerseys, but they do the ceremonial face-off. Who is taking it against Connor McDavid?
Josh Morrissey.
Not the center, Mark Scheifele, who was starting the game.
Who was on the ice and standing on the blue line when that happened.
Yes, and so Josh Morrissey has to go over the boards and take the face-off. I was like, against McDavid?
I said the exact same thing to Murray. We were in the seats. We were down in the lower bowl. I'm like, watch this. Oh, well, interesting. Hey,
against McDavid. On Wasack night, you send out your defenseman. I just thought instead of your center, who's already out there. Thought it was interesting.
No, he has truly become the leader, the alpha in the room right now, and need another great game tonight. And it will be real fun to see Erik Karlsson with the season that he's had. Let's get back to Bones though, because we do have some lineup changes that we just touched on. Let's get to number 11, Remo. Rick Bowness today, after the morning skate, spoke to a couple of guys coming back into the lineup, including Pierre-Luc Dubois. Here's what Bones had to say on the lineup changes for tonight.
Confirm some lineup decisions. PLD and Mason will both be back tonight?
Yes.
And Nate comes back in for Kyle?
Kyle, who was under the weather. That's why he was not on the ice today.
Right. If he wasn't under the weather given his game the other day?
Kyle was under the weather, so Nate goes in.
Yeah. Might he have...
Good try.
Okay. And David is going to be in net, just a case of trying to manage Connor's workload a little bit?
Yeah, it is. He played the back-to-back, which wasn't not in the plans. We wanted to play Ritter on Saturday night, so it's the way we ended up doing it. I know we had the day off yesterday, but we've got, with Minnesota coming in, it's a good chance for David to play. Plus, when we go on the road next week, there's 3 and 4. David's certainly going to have to play in one of those games, so we had to get him in.
All right. Well, Mike gets a good job, good effort for trying to get a little bit more from Bones. He wasn't going that way. But the key part of all of that, and most importantly, is Pierre-Luc Dubois back in the lineup tonight. And Dubois, let's go to 9 and 10 here, Remo. Dubois spoke this morning and just talked about getting back into the lineup with his teammates against the Sharks this evening.
I feel good enough, obviously, to be back in tonight. Skated a decent amount the past week or so. Yesterday it was a day off, treatment day, so that felt good. And today felt really good, so back in tonight.
Must have been a pretty helpless feeling being in the in the press box for that game Friday night in Edmonton. Little bit less so as his team rallied with all of that excitement on Saturday night. But the Winnipeg Jets, if they're going to win hockey games consistently, are going to need number 80 at center ice. Here's one more from Dubois, who just talked about how he felt being out of the lineup during this crucial point in the season.
Yeah, I think as a competitor, you want to get out there every game, whether you're injured or not. But also on the other side of things, you get injuries that could get a lot worse and very fast. So it was frustrating a little bit just to, my brain knew I shouldn't be out there, but my body and my competitive side wanted to be out there. So I'm excited for tonight to get the chance to help these guys.
Pierre-Luc, Bones described your injury as quote-unquote nagging. How long has that been hampering you?
Not too long. It's just one of those things that the only way for it to get better is to get off the ice and to give it some time to heal. And everybody has bumps and bruises and tears and whatnot. It's part of the business, but now I'm fully back and I'm happy to get back out there tonight.
All right, so there is Dubois. He is back in the lineup tonight, and he, as we mentioned before, is going to be skating with Nikolai Ehlers and Blake Wheeler, Connor Scheifele, and Niederreiter, the top line of Vlad Nemetsnikov. On the right side of Lowry and Barron, and the fourth line looks to be Meneline and Stenlund and Mason Appleton. Hey, Chris Beck, thank you so much. Don't catch the show live much anymore, but seldom miss the pod. Had to congratulate you on show 500. Eternally grateful to both of you. You guys are the absolute best. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chris, for the support you've given us. And, of course, Jeff Kabilis, a regular, an OG in here. Happy 500. Let's go for 1,000 now. Cheers, boys. Cheers to you, Kabilis. And I know a great one from T. Konopali as well. One of our all-time greatest supporters, along with the rest of you. Thanks again, everyone. Make sure you've hit that red subscribe button, by the way, if you haven't already, and give a thumbs up to the show for 500. All right. Bones talked about, or was asked, if tonight has the potential for a letdown game. I haven't heard this answer, but I imagine his answer is something along the lines of it better not be. Here's Bones.
It better not be. Yesterday morning we woke up in third. This morning we wake up in eighth. That's how tight it's going to be. So regardless of the opponent, regardless of the Saturday night Hockey Night in Canada or Monday night San Jose, man, we got to play our game and we got to bring that emotion. And one of the things I loved, you saw when we got that late power play goal, Scheif, fortunately, he didn't hurt him, but he tackles Mo. But that's the passion, that's the emotion that we want to see every night. That's what's going to carry us through these next 19 games. But like we just talked about, you want to wake up in the morning, you be in third, or you wake up the next morning, you're in eighth. But that's how tight it's going to be. And it's not going away. And it's going to be in there. And it's up to us to manufacture that every night.
All right. Well, that was pretty much as I expected. I mean, it is so tight right now. And hey, by the way, Jeff Bose, thanks very much for the super chat as well. This is you guys are too kind. Bones did talk about Nate Schmidt though coming back into the lineup. Here's the head coach on 88 returning the blue line.
Just to play like he can play. He's better than he's shown. He's a veteran guy, and we just need him to play like that. And just like Nate's a big reason of why we're where we are all year long. He's that's why we are. I mean, earlier in the year we were playing better and we were challenging for first place in the conference, and Nate was a big part of it. His play dropped off. It's just a little more inconsistent. We need him to be just very consistent at what Nate Smith does well. Go back, get the puck, make the right play with the puck, come up with the play, and help the power play.
As a veteran coach, how do you know when it's time to sit someone versus having a meeting with them or giving them a chance to play?
I always warn them. It's never right out of the blue. They're not shocked by it. So Nate and I have had conversations over the last month. So it's not Kim right out of the blue. You're not playing tonight. It's you got to play better. Now you've brought yourself into the discussion. Are you going to play every night? Now you've got to play your way out of that discussion. So, anyways.
Oh, I would have a follow-up question. Who else has had those conversations, Bones, this year about playing their way into potentially not being in? If only we could know. Bottom line is, I think we'll see an energized Nate Schmidt back in the lineup tonight as Kyle Capobianco, who played very well on Saturday, out and ill. Remo, let's get up, though, to Nikolai Ehlers, and we'll hear from Nikolai Ehlers in a minute, but, he has struggled at times. He hasn't played as much as he is accustomed to. And he's had a tough time finding real chemistry with his line mates. Start off with number 12, Remo, and then we'll hear 13. This is Bones on Ehlers' relatively low ice time last game.
You have to watch the game and see what we were doing. Okay, Mark's line was, they had those early goals. They got us going. Adam's line was going against McDavid. The Gus line was playing really well on the forecheck. I really wasn't happy with 28's game, and I had to talk to him about that this morning. So Nick's ice time was really affected by that more than anything. So the other three lines were going. I didn't like the looks of that. It wasn't going as good as the other lines. And because of the way of the rotation of getting Adam out there against McDavid, it did cut back into their ice time.
Just with that injury, though, and his explosiveness is such a big part of his game. Is that something that it does, in your eyes, it's going to take some time for him to maybe get back to the Nikolai Ehlers we've all seen?
No.
You think he's there?
He wouldn't be playing if we didn't feel that he was close to 100%. Now, it's like Apple. They've missed so much time. The timing and the reads and everything else, that takes more time than anything. And, he's never played with Kevin before. So that wasn't in sync, and I could tell that. So now with Dubois back, it gets a little easier to get him more minutes. So it's based more on that than anything else. The other three lines going. I know there wasn't great chemistry between Kevin and Nick, and I could see that. But I wasn't going to tamper with the other three lines because they were all doing the job that we asked them to do.
Wow, sort of hung that one on Stenny and called him 28 as opposed to his name. Never a good sign. By the way, Jet Oil Tom, WST lover, don't know how I would function without you guys. So thankful. Thank you, Jet Oil Tom. And Bobby B, great show today, and thanks for the first 500. Looking forward to the anniversary show coming up on Wednesday. Bobby, thanks so much for doing that. That was the one thing that really stood out about the game on Saturday night, and Bones mentioned this. It was very evident being in the building, just seeing how much he was rolling the lines and how much the third and fourth lines were playing in a game against a high-powered team like the Oilers. And certainly that third line got a big, big boost from Nemetsnikov's addition. But even with two of the guys from the fourth line out tonight for the game with the return of Dubois and Appleton, the Gustafsson line played well and played a lot, especially in key moments in that third period. And that isn't something we'd seen in a long time, Reem.
Yeah, we're used to the Jets' fourth lines historically being, 6, 7, 8 minutes. The lowest ice time was Axel with 8:39 of ice time. And then you have Menelainen, just over 10 minutes. Ehlers, 11:52. Nemestikov, 14. And yeah, I agree. Nikolai Ehlers needs to be playing 15 to 20 minutes a game, ideally 18, 19. And really, it did hung on it. He was playing on a crappy line with a guy
I didn't like 28's game.
Wasn't meshing with. Really drove the bus over 28. And look, I don't really blame Stenley. We know he was signed in the offseason as, I think, did he have a two-way deal or been a fringe, fourth line guy? That's a pretty big role upgrade for him. Second line, sometimes you can handle it. Sometimes You can, and
he still keeps getting thrown. He still keeps getting thrown out on the penalty kill to win faceoffs because no one else can seemingly do it on a regular basis.
I mean, Stenny, he's had 1 minute shorthanded, a minute 20 on a power play. I mean, I looked the last couple of games, like with Dubois, you really see the depth at center. They don't really have a score unless they decide to put Wheeler back there at center like they did when Scheifele was out
struggling
years ago.
Wheeler's struggling.
I don't think
big
that's
time since he's come back.
So
I mean, there was at times he was playing really, really well this season. He has somewhat hit the wall. Hopefully that turns around because they are going to need him. Pretty much it's all hands on deck right now as we get closer.
We're talking about Ehlers, recovery from his injury, but I wonder, Wheeler had the ultimate injury and made the ultimate sacrifice for this team. So I do wonder.
Good point.
None of us know what he's. I don't think anyone really knows what he's really been going through.
The ultimate sacrifice. Kenny's water bottle, another generous super chat. Congratulations on 500 and looking forward to the next 500. Thanks, KWB, and shout out to Bullsy, who just jumped on board as a supporter of Winnipeg Sports Talk as well. So there was bones on the ice time last game. Just a little bit more from the coach on if he's having trouble finding a line mate for Nikolai Ehlers. Here's what Bones had to say on that.
Not tonight. We go with Dubois.
Right, but I mean, he's been up and down. You've tried him on the top line. You've tried him on the
third. But we haven't been in this position that we are tonight with the other lines pretty much set. So we'll try. Yeah, we've got to get that going. I like the look of Nino with Scheifele the other night. I like that look. So now we go this way. When we start to keep throwing bodies in here, it disrupts your lines, it disrupts your chemistry, and sometimes it takes a little while to get that flow back, and we're kind of dealing with that now.
All right, one more from Bones on Ehlers, and he was talked about Ehlers' skill at zone entries, but also the struggles that he has had since his return, specifically and especially, I'd say, in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, pretty. I mean, it's been. You see some of those flashes from him, but I don't know. There has been, us speculating here. Is there some lingering effects from that sports hernia surgery?
Well, we will hear that from Ehlers in a minute. Just fire up number 14, No Remo. This will be an interesting one, and then we'll hear sort of Nikolai Ehlers talk about a few of these topics that he addressed earlier today as well.
Okay, so this is what Bones talking about.
14.
Yeah, talking about Ehlers and the zone injuries.
We sat down and went over his shifts the other day, and that's all I want him to do is carry that puck in as much as he can and circle the net and find those guys. That's where he's very good at. That's exactly the conversation in the exact video we went over the other day. In Edmonton, I thought there was a couple times he pulled up and turned it over when he could have kept skating. So he's being encouraged to do exactly what you just asked me. In Edmonton, he didn't do it enough. Yeah.
Is that just a lack of confidence then on his part? Like, where are you seeing the lack of?
That's the missing that much time, and just sometimes you feel more crowded than you really are. And when you look at the video, you say, yeah, wow, I did have more room there. Sometimes you get out there and there's bigger guys. And again, it's so easy from upstairs. And it's so easy on the video, right? Power of pause. We can make anything look good or bad depending on what we want to say. And we can, right? We can take a very positive clip and pause it at the right time and make it negative if we want it. But no, so my purpose with Nick the other day was just to show him that you do have more time and you can keep skating and you can carry that puck in deep and find those late guys, which is strength. But again, when you haven't played a lot and your timing and your reads off, sometimes that happens. So we guide them through it.
All right, there's Bones. I'm talking a little bit about working with Nikolai Ehlers to get him back being the most effective Jet that he can be. By the way, Bullsy, thanks again for the super chat as well. Congrats on 500, guys. And shout out to Jan, Jets fan as well, for the super chat. We do have one more clip. Then we'll hit the Coolbet lines because we do got to get this pod up before the early game. But Ehlers sort of respond to a few questions from Mike McIntyre about his low ice time lately and just how he's feeling overall.
I mean, if you don't play well, then I guess you don't play. So I'll keep working.
Do you think you're not playing well?
I don't know. We'll see.
terms of, though, sports hernias are tough injuries, right? But to come in is the first you've had with it. Like, do you feel you're 100%, or is it still a work in progress to maybe get back to where you are when you are 100%?
It's still a work in progress. You play every other night. You feel it. So it feels good, but there's definitely times that you feel it a little bit extra. So I try to take care of it as much as I can with treatment and workout and all of that. So I feel 100% good enough to play. So yeah.
All right, so there's Nikolai Ehlers, and we'll see if Nick can maybe have a big bounce back game tonight, because I don't think the Jets are going to be able to rely on Capobianco and multiple goals from the bottom six. I mean, the guys that they absolutely need to get going. 27, 81. It is his bobblehead night tonight. Remo, you might be able to fire out some stats of how players have done in their own bobblehead night. But this would be a great night to get KFC going on. That being said, there's many streaks being broken. As Phyllis mentioned, the Jets were 0-4 on Wasack nights before Saturday night.
I saw that.
And now they did get the win. So maybe we can get a massive, massive performance for a guy in his own bobblehead night, because that has not been
it's not been the norm,
the case.
But it has happened.
Pav got the hook in his one, didn't he? He actually
I'll go over the history. I have it written down. I noticed the trend years ago, and it's kind of continued, although it did break. It's just on Nikolai Ehlers. He's like, I'm 100%, as in I'm ready to play, but sometimes it just hurts a lot, and it sounded like 100% to him, and his definition was, can he play or not, and not how he's feeling. So we'll have to see how he looks tonight. It was a bit of a stretch there without scoring. I mean, you look at his last 9 games, he's got 2 points, Huss, and is -8. He's averaging 14.5 minutes of ice time. Not the Nikolai Ehlers that we know, but hey, he's playing with Dubois tonight, and we know he's better player than 28. No offense to 28, but
28. Is that what we're calling Stenny now?
Well, I don't want to name names.
Stenny.
I don't want to name names. Coach
just name numbers.
We'll just name numbers. Coach drove the bus over him, so I don't want to do any more damage. Like he took it pretty good there in that media conference, but just on bobblehead night. So we'll go back. 2012, Andrew Ladd, 0 points, -3, and the Jets lost 3-2. 2013, Pavlik, 5 goals allowed, .792 save percentage, 1 stick smashed into pieces. The Jets lost 6-4.
He got the hook too in that one. I do seem to remember.
Bufflin, 2014, 0 points, -2. Jets lost 3-2. This is the one good one. I'll go 2019 Ehlers, 0 points, -4. Jets lost 5-4. This is the one that broke the trend. Scheifele, 2018, 1 goal. Was the OT winner, and the Jets won 4-3. He was +2. And Hellebuck last year had a pretty good game. The Jets did lose 3-2, but it wasn't because of Hellebuck. He stopped 32 of 34, and they lost 3-1. One of those was an empty netter, and there's a bunch of. I mean, those are the players that have played. So when the player, it's their bobblehead night, and he plays in the game, team is 1-5, but total they're 4-5 because Brian Little fractured a vertebrae, didn't play. Jacob Trouba had a concussion, didn't play. Is there others that I'm missing here? I'm
trying to think of what the other bobblehead night is. I think I have
Wheeler, and I got to dig up. It's on the Illegal Curve website and my own website, so I keep track of the Jets record. I don't know. Maybe I'm bobblehead guy.
These important ones.
This is really important analytics. Yeah, of course.
Jets -198 favorites tonight. Let's get over to the Coolbet lines and see what we've got cooking for this evening. Total for the game is 6.5, and a lot of goals scored lately in Winnipeg Jet games. Overs even money. Under is -117, and the Jets puck line, if you do like him to win by 2, is +129. As far as player goals tonight, Kyle Connor +122.
For sure.
The first time I can remember all season Mark Scheifele's goal prop being less than Kyle Connor's. And what's interesting is the other guys have gone the other way. Nikolai Ehlers hasn't been 2-1 in a long time. And there's Nino Niederreiter, who's going to be playing with Scheifele and Connor at 2-1 as well. If you want to get a total of over 2 goals, Kyle Connor plus 650. And man, if you think KFC is ready to bust out of it on bobblehead night with a hat trick, plus 2150. So govern yourselves accordingly if you want to get a little bit of a KFC prop. I do have an exclusive in the Coolbet exclusives. Click on Lock Shop Partner Parlay. Dusty's got one going on for this Edmonton Buffalo game tonight. McDavid to score, Tage Thompson to score, Oilers to win, and total goals over 6.5 at plus 580. And our one for the Jets, it's actually gone down a little bit. Jets to win, total over 5.5, and Kyle Connor, Josh Morrissey, and Nino Niederreiter each to record at least 1 point. They've obviously had some action on this because it did open up at plus 500. It's now plus 460 over in the Coolbet exclusives. And hey, I got to give a big thanks to Nick and Nikki DQ. I think we might do a little anniversary blizzard cake for Wednesday's second anniversary. If you've got a party or a big event, why not take it to the next level with a delicious ice cream cake or blizzard cake from the Nick and Nikki DQ group. You can order online at DQ Manitoba. Get it custom made however you like it. And the best thing about it is you got a quick and easy pickup at any of the 4 Nick and Nikki DQs where you can grab a flamethrower burger, maybe some chicken fingers and fries while you're at it. 4 locations: DQ Niverville, DQ Northgate, DQ Polo Park, and DQ St. Anne's. Big thanks to Nick and Nikki DQ, who have been with us for every single one of our 500 episodes. Remo, I know we got to get out, but man, this has been a great show. I mean, thanks so much to all of these generous super chats. I see Isha Boy Bruce just dropped one. Congrats on 500, and congrats for all the sports talk, laughs, and sometimes tears. Oh, and tickets. Thanks for the tickets. You got that, Bruce. And shout out to Scardy. Congrats on 500, Huss and Remo. You guys are trailblazers. Scardy, thanks so much for your support and all of your action in the chat. I do want to mention this for our pal Brian Munns and the gang over with the Winnipeg Ice. Ice are back at home following a 10-game road trip where they earned an 8-2 record, pumped the Wheaties on Saturday after a loss to Connor Bedard earlier on in the weekend. They're taking on Medicine Hat tomorrow, 7 o'clock at the Ice Cave, and the Ice can be the first team to win 50 games in the WHL. They're 49-9-1 in 59 games played. Zach Benson is one of the top prospects for this summer's NHL draft, 3 points shy of 100 this season, second in league points, trailing only Connor Bedard. And we're going to have Zach Benson to talk about his season with the team, as well as it being his draft year later on this week. Don't miss that. And tomorrow, last 2 for Tuesday of the season, where you can get 2 tickets for $24, 2 hot dogs for $8, 2 beers for $10, 2 popcorns for the price of 1. Great savings for that game tomorrow night. So maybe it's time we pack that Ice Cave and welcome back the Ice and see if they can win number 50 on the weekend. And shout out to the Westmen as well. They did not prevail in the Can West final, but they're off to nationals. They are the 7th seed. So good luck to the University of Winnipeg men's basketball team. Remo, big one tonight and a big show tomorrow as well. We'll have John Mattis on, Mike McIntyre from the Winnipeg Free Press, and then, of course, Wednesday, huge game against the Minnesota Wild and the official second birthday of Winnipeg Sports Talk.
Yeah, this is a big week, trade deadline week last week, and a little aftermath, a couple Jets games. We didn't really mention the Mooseheads. They did drop 2 to Chicago on the weekend, but I did see a viral moment. Chicago
they won yesterday.
Oh, 5-3. I can't read. Sorry, yeah. I have the score in front of me. Sorry, they did.
Yeah, there was almost a goalie fight at the end of the game.
Well, I got to say, it was all about the goalies. Kochetkov scored the goal on Friday's game, and they didn't like the way that he celebrated after? I don't know. If a goalie scores, go nuts, I guess. How often does that happen? but I think it got a little heated. It's always good when
Salmonen, Oskari Salmonen went across center, dropped the gloves with about 30 seconds left in the game, and then the refs got in, and that would have been interesting. Moose looking good, though, and continued a great run. I mean, that homestand they just finished up, let's just confirm these numbers. They had the win yesterday against the Wolves, which ended up being 5-3. They lost on Friday 4-1, but swept the Milwaukee Admirals, split with the Grand Rapids Griffins, and beat the Iowa Wild twice. So what's that? 6-1-1 over the course of the trip. So, or 6-2, I guess, on the homestand overall. Now a long road trip for the Moose. They are on the road from the 7th all the way to the 19th. Next home action is the 22nd of March, but that's perfect because just in time for the Ice to come back again tomorrow, and then some big games coming up this weekend. As I mentioned, Zach Benson, top NHL draft prospect and the leading scorer on the Ice, is going to be joining us later on. And just on the way out, Remo, I have to mention this while we're talking about the Ice. Our pal Scott Wheeler, who writes on prospects for The Athletic, threw out a tweet today looking ahead to Team Canada's team for the 2024 World Juniors. He is predicting a top line for Team Canada to be Zach Benson, Connor Geekie, and Matt Savoy.
Really?
All members of the Ice. So we were talking about how the Ice somewhat got jobbed last year and a bunch of guys didn't even get a look. There's a good chance that an entire Winnipeg Ice line could be the top line for Team Canada at next year's World Juniors.
Yeah, I thought you were going to read this other tweet from Scott Wheeler. Huss, I retweeted. He said, after a 4-assist weekend, Brad Lambert is up to 27 points in 18 games in the WHL. That's a 1.5 points per game, 102-point pace over 68 games. So Scott Wheeler dropping some nice junior hockey facts there. Brad Lambert tearing it up there with Seattle in the dub.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, gang, we got to go. Thank you very much for all the generous super chats to everyone that popped by. And most of all, thanks to everyone that has just made us a part of their routine for the first 500. And here's to many more. And of course, we couldn't do it without the incredible support we've had from our sponsors. When you have the opportunity to support them, we greatly appreciate you doing that. Thanks to Frank Seravalli. Thanks to Jeff Hamilton and to all of you. Make sure you've hit that red subscribe button before you go. Tell a friend about Winnipeg Sports Talk. Enjoy the game tonight. Get that bobblehead if you're getting down to the rink. I do think there's some tickets still available, so get on them if you haven't already. Maybe we'll see you at the game, and if not, we'll definitely see you tomorrow, 1 o'clock live on Winnipeg Sports Talk right here on YouTube. Thanks again to everyone checking out the pod as well. Have a great night, everyone. We'll see you Tuesday.
Oh, my God! Oh! Shut it down! Let's go home!
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.